right, we're ready to go.
Good evening, everybody. Today is December 7th, 2021, and this is the Oregon City Commission work session. I'm calling this meeting to order. Mr. Riley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Here. We don't always loop. So the first item up is future agenda items. Mr. Conkle, do you have anything on this item?
So included in here, we've got the joint meeting with the Planning Commission scheduled for the work session in January. We're trying to, and I think we're in pretty good shape, rescheduling the Historic Review Board. I think I just wanted to clarify as it related to that joint work session with the Historic Review Board, that really it was kind of a Design Guidelines 101, a conversation about what the guidelines say and how they're applying those. So I just wanted to clarify because I think we're wondering what we should prepare for that meeting with HRB. If there were strong opinions one way or the other about something specific, or if it was more general about Historic Review Board reviews against the guidelines of the historic districts.
All of the above is not specific enough.
Well, all of the above of what he just said. Yes, the design guidelines.
So in my mind, we would be working with the attorney and the Historic Review Board planner to kind of spell out the policies that are used when we review an application, and then see where the conversation goes from there. Does that seem what you were looking for?
I think one of the important things, Mr. Conkle, and I would emphasize this, is that much like this commission, who is governed by rules or regulations, important for that committee and for every committee to apply those and be wary of latitudes taken with them and the difficulties that can cause. And as you see, we get into a situation where if there's variation from applying the applicable codes, then we end up in an appeal situation to the city commission. So it's just an understanding of their duties and what proper performance of those duties is and how that affects everyone.
I'd also like to add that regarding the purview of the Historic Review Board, there was some question at the last meeting of, are we allowed to review that? And I don't know if that's the question. You look at the purposes in the municipal code regarding the purview of the Historic Review Board. It covers a lot of things that affect both of the districts and the buildings that are outside. And part of that has to do with how things that are adjacent affect the resource, whatever it may be, whether it's, even if we're talking about natural resources, sometimes an adjacent development or an adjacent building, an adjacent something can have an impact on that particular process. And so I think that would be something that we could discuss with them. A lot of things that may not seem related to historic review are because it's sort of that overlap between design and the land use part, because it kind of covers both things depending on what the review is.
I have a question. When appointments are made to any of these boards, and this one specifically, is there an educational process for those people that come on board to familiarize themselves with the documents they'll be applying?
Yes, but they also have to have certain proficiencies. The criteria for looking at those folks, as we went through the review last time, is that we're looking for people that have at least a basic understanding. So for instance, let me just use the representatives that come from each of the two districts. So number one, it's helpful, obviously, if they live there and they have some knowledge of, kind of historic properties. And I was thinking about the last set of appointments prior to your coming on, when the folks were coming in and, listening to their interviews and reading their material. You know, yes, I've lived in this neighborhood for this long and I've participated in this, or I live in a historic house and I have a real understanding of, you know, the elements of what goes on, because they're not only living it, they're applying it to themselves as their particular. And then the architect or builder or somebody in the trades needs to have some understanding of what goes into doing that type of construction. Because for me personally, there's some basic things about a historic home that don't apply to like your house. There's just little nuances and differences. And I think that's why John McLaughlin, who was a former chair, was so good, because he actually owned these older homes, plus he's done a lot of renovation work on them, so he knows those little nuances, and he could say, oh yeah, I understand that you need to do that.
The reason I asked the question is if there are pending appointments to that committee, I want to make sure the timing is such that those newly appointed personnel are in attendance at this meeting.
Well, that would be the goal. So my goal is to make appointments at the first meeting in January, which is January 5th. So we're doing all of our interviews. We essentially, Lisa and I and staff have been stacking interviews pretty much all of my free days, Monday through Friday in December, to try to get through them all. So the goal would be to make sure we have an appointment ready for January 5th, and therefore, hopefully, Tony, I know we talked about this yesterday. Have we already reached out to HRB to make sure they can make it on the 11th? I think you said you did.
We're working on that, yeah. Because originally we had scheduled them for February, and then the commission asked to move them up to January. So we're trying to reschedule everyone up to that January one, just because we had planning commission on January as well. And so we're working on that part of it.
Are you asking us to participate in that?
I've asked Commissioner O'Donnell to participate in it, in the interviews.
Okay, I mean, obviously I have nothing against Commissioner O'Donnell, but I would like to think that I do have some expertise in that particular area.
All right, so if we're going to talk, this is a discussion we'll take offline.
Sure, that's fine.
I believe in our meeting yesterday, too, the other thing that we tried to move up into January to mention is the charter amendments, right? If you didn't want
Correct.
Sorry, I'm probably getting in front of you. Go ahead.
Nope, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, so I think, met with the mayor, we meet regularly to look at the agendas that are coming up. One thing that we're looking at is either sliding the ARPA funding discussion or trying to do all that on one night. I'm just a little worried on length of meeting. ARPA funding is not, it has to happen by a certain date. So we might slide the ARPA funding in order to bring forward the discussion that the commission had about the charter amendments related to, appointments, term limits, et cetera, just because if the commission wanted to put that onto the May ballot, we have an early March deadline to get there. So we were going to try to move things around a little bit to bring that a little bit quicker in order to allow time to be able to, if the commission decided they wanted to go on a ballot earlier, we could accommodate that.
Okay, anything else? Questions or comments on future agenda items? All right, seeing none?
Yep.
Anything
and
else?
If I could just real quick, Jacob, I think we had Aquila online as well. I had it written down at our last meeting and I went right over the top of it, but over Zoom here, I'd like to introduce Aquila Vergravich, our interim community development director. I know you are all aware that I had brought her in to help in the transition after Laurel left. So we do have, I just wanted to introduce Aquila online here. She comes to us, she was with Tualatin before coming to Oregon City here. 13 years there. She started as a senior planner, was their planning manager, and then was their community development director. But just wanted to put a face to the name since you've probably seen it on some emails going around lately. So Aquila, if you just want to say a couple words and introduce yourself.
Hello. Oh, wow. This is, sorry, I'm getting some, seeing, multiples of me right now. Hi, my name is Nicola Vergravich, as Tony mentioned, and I started last Monday, and so I'm really happy to be here. I've met some really great people. I'm really excited about the staff that I'll be working with, and everybody at the city has been really welcoming. So I look forward to working more with you. And I, typically planning topics rise up to the city commission pretty regularly. So I'm looking forward to working with you and presenting information to you.
All right, thank you. It's very nice to see you and see a face that goes with the name. So welcome aboard, and we really appreciate you helping out and filling the interim vacancy that we have. I'm sure we will see you more.
Definitely. That's all that I have.
And how long is she on? Is it through the hiring process and then maybe a little bit of a overlap if needed?
Correct.
That's the plan. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any questions or anything from other commissioners? All right, seeing none, I think we'll move on in the agenda to our discussion items. The first item up is the adoption of the Park Place Urbanization Plan. Just to be clear, we're not adopting anything tonight. This is just informational because we had a lot of questions the first time it came to us. And like Josh Wheeler's coming up. Mr. Lewis, did you want to introduce this or say anything, or we turning it over to Josh?
It's pretty short, but I would just say that, Josh Wheeler is Assistant City Engineer. Josh does a lot of things, kind of like Dante does a lot of things. Josh does a lot of things too. So one of the things that he's worked on is this Park Place concept plan, or urbanization plan. So he knows all the parts and pieces to this. So thanks for that. And Josh, go ahead.
John, you need to get closer to the mic. I don't know if the regular people could hear this.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, good evening. We have a presentation tonight. We did a small version of this presentation on November 3rd, and it was requested that we get into more details of this plan, and so that's what we're going to do tonight. It'll be a bit longer than what you heard previously. So the purpose behind creating this plan was to provide appropriate cross-sections for the roadways in Park Place, as the existing TSP and code are not always possible in this area due to its existing housing, the locations of that, and the rural nature of the neighborhood. The goal was to keep the rural nature to the degree practical and desired by the neighborhood. This plan was determined to be needed by the development staff due to the existing older Park Place neighborhood, which was originally developed under county standards. And it had inconsistent improvements and a lack of urbanization to the existing street network. This study was also considered based on community feedback of a desire to see additional sidewalks within the neighborhood. The focus of the study was really to determine existing problems and then determine what should be built and where, what some of those improvements will cost, and how they should be prioritized. The study assumes that a majority of the improvements would be completed by private development. However, projects may be considered as a capital project if the funds were to become available. So here you see a picture of the Park Place neighborhood with a red line outlining the scope of the project. The original scope was to look at that boundary, which is really the existing infrastructure within the entire Park Place neighborhood. It was assumed that all new infrastructure outside of the red line would be able to meet the TSP and code standards as they exist today. After assessment of that red boundary area, it was found that the focus of the plan really needed to be, for the most part, west of Swann Avenue, as that was the area where existing infrastructure was substantially deficient. It was learned that most of the neighborhood east of Swann had been more recently developed using current standards. Our report has been updated to reflect that. Back on November 3rd, it was asked from the commission to add clarification of that boundary, and we did that in section 1.1 of the plan. Also, section 1.2 includes a statement that the Park Place concept area is not included as part of this plan because we believe brand new development on vacant land will be able to meet the code with no problems. And if it has any problems, they have avenues to do that through the modification process. Existing sidewalk gaps are shown in red on this picture. You can see that the majority of the sidewalk gaps exist west of Swann, except for a portion of the Oak Terrace neighborhood and in the Ames neighborhood, which is on the north side, near the school. However, road widths are acceptable in those areas that are east of Swann, whereas the north-south streets west, Swann, Hunter, Apperson Front, do need further development.
Josh, are you pointing to something with your,
I am not.
okay, because I kept thinking, okay, I don't see
No.
anything.
There's no red marker, just the ability to click the,
Oh, okay.
I don't know where you have to, does it matter where you point this thing at?
There is a laser on it, but I
Oh.
doubt someone could see it from
No, I was
across
just
the room.
curious, point to be able to flip to the next screen.
Yeah, it would have been, I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out, we were talking about the Ames area, so
Sure.
there's a way to point to that.
Josh, if you just kind of tell me where you'd like.
Yeah, I can explain that. So there is a red dot on the screen over to my left. Yes, where Jacob is going over to the left a little bit, Jacob, you see some red lines right through there. So that's Ames, and then the neighborhood that comes down to the school to the right, not to the left, to the right.
Sorry.
Yes, the school's over there. And then if you go directly south of there, Jacob, that's the, just forgot the name of it. The Oak Terrace neighborhood. Yeah. But you can see those are the few areas that are deficient in sidewalks, but everything west of there, which is Swann and forward, is where the pedestrian improvements are really needed substantially. These are some examples of pedestrian challenges. You have an example here of how sidewalks dead end to another property, how it dead ends even to a structure, and how it may just end and not continue because either the property hasn't been developed or for other reasons like the trees you see in the picture on the right. So sometimes there are challenges to extending the sidewalk, but with development, usually there's a way, no pun intended, around that sometimes. Bicycle challenges also exist within the Park Place neighborhood. There are very few bicycle paths. Holcomb Boulevard has a decent amount of bicycle lanes, but not all of Holcomb has that yet. And even though Holcomb wasn't part of the study, that's just to let you know that if you want to bike in the Park Place neighborhood, that's pretty much the only place that any biking paths exist that are designated. There is a small amount on Swann Avenue that you'll see a picture of later. But besides that, there are no bike lanes. They're all intended to be shared spaces with the vehicles. What this picture shows in the red shade is areas of pavement widths less than 20 feet. So you can see a lot of that exists from Swann westward. Some examples of what that looks like are here. These are pictures taken actually today. Hunter Avenue on the left and Hiram Avenue on the right. Those are areas of pavement width that is 20 feet or less. So pretty narrow for a lot of users. A question was asked back on November 3rd about the right-of-way impacts. What this picture shows is the full exhibit on the left and then a zoomed in portion of that exhibit on the right. It's figure 410 in the revised report. And we've shown every existing right-of-way width and the proposed right-of-way that there would be based on the cross-sections we have proposed. It should be noted that there was a question about Holcomb as well. And Holcomb right-of-way width exists anywhere from 60 to 75 feet right now. The Holcomb pedestrian plan provides a guideline that says that the cross-sections should be 60 to 65 feet. But in recent years, we have found that additional improvements beyond the Holcomb pedestrian plan are needed. And so the 75 feet that we have been getting makes a lot of sense. There was a question on November 3rd about our public participation process. And so the next two slides show that. We mailed postcards to 1,353 addresses in those areas within that red boundary. And those are people that are either living in or own property in the Park Place neighborhood within that red boundary. Some people may ask, 1,353 seems like too many postcards. Part of the reason for that is the Clackamas County Housing Authority has 2 neighborhoods, which is where some of those also went as well. We worked with Kristen Brown to provide next door messaging as well as social media messaging to find ways to reach the public beyond those postcards. We also notified the CIC, who chose not to hear the plan because they felt that the neighborhood itself had done an appropriate job in hearing the plan and listening to the plan, commenting on the plan. We did meet with the Park Place neighborhood twice, and we did notify stakeholders via those postcards with a survey that showed them how to make their comments known publicly. And then we had 2 planning commission meetings, and then we had a web page that we kept updated as well. The next slide shows that we had a public process that went from January 18th until really present day, last on November 3rd. There are a number of meetings there, and some of them are statements showing how and when we asked for input. And so that's there for your information. So in the neighborhood survey process, we did 2 surveys. The first survey was meant to be kind of overarching to understand what are the general desires of the neighborhood. You know, do they want more sidewalks? Do they want bike lanes separated? Do they want parking? Do they feel the roads should remain rural in nature or urbanized? And then our second survey really went into the details. Okay, now that we've heard that, here's a cross-section we're proposing. Do you give a yes or a no to that cross-section? And so that was kind of how we did the surveys. To note that survey number 1 had 200 respondents. And then what you see in some of the data there in the slide, 63% of respondents felt that it was important to provide space for bicycles separate from cars. However, 62% of respondents also said widening the streets should not be a priority. However, it's not possible to provide a separate space for bicycles without widening the streets, so that kind of gave us a quandary of how do we resolve those 2 desires, and it was generally decided that going with the first desire to provide a place for bikes without bike lanes, and also due to the impacts it would make to properties and be fairly impossible to be consistent due to the proximity of some existing structures. In that second survey, you see some results here. The example on the left is one of the questions we had on Hunter Avenue. We showed them this cross-section and said, is this appropriate or not? 77% said yes, this is the cross-section we support. The picture on the right side shows the family-friendly routes, and we asked, is this proper for a family-friendly route, which is a road that's designated to remain more rural in nature and not have urbanized improvements. And 82% agreed with that and agreed where those roads should be as well. So what that brought us to was a final product, which we call the Roadway Classification Plan that you see here. The picture you're looking at, dark blue, designates street-specific cross-sections. The green shows family-friendly routes that will generally retain their rural nature. And the light blue designates streets which should retain their TSP classification and cross-section as it exists today. So now what I'm going to show you is 4 cross-sections of the road-specific cross-sections that are proposed and were supported through the surveys. And I'm going to show you the cross-section, and I'm going to show you some pictures to help you understand what that looks like in kind of real time. So what you're seeing here is Apperson Street. The existing right-of-way is 50 to 54 feet. The minimum right-of-way needed for this cross-section is 40 feet. So we do have plenty of right-of-way out there. It's intended to have a shared bicycle and automobile paved area. and then a curb-tight sidewalk. This is what Apperson looks like today. These pictures were taken today on December 7th. Picture on the left shows sidewalks on both sides of the street, curb-tight, without any parking or without any designated bike lanes. And that's a fully urbanized area of Apperson. The picture on the right, in the background, you'll see sidewalks on both sides of the road. And then as you get closer to the front side of the picture, you'll see that there's no sidewalk on the left. So that's an area that we need to be developed and have sidewalks placed along it. The next cross section I'll go into is Front Avenue. Front Avenue assumes that parking will occur on this road, but that the bikes and the cars will share that space, and then there will be a curb-tight sidewalk. The existing right-of-way ranges from 44 to 60 feet, and the minimum right-of-way needed for this cross-section is 44 feet. So in general, we do have enough right-of-way throughout this roadway. And this is what Front Avenue looks like today. This is looking southward. On the left side, which is near Park Place Park, you'll see that there is no sidewalk along that side of the road, but there is curb-tight sidewalk on the right side, and you'll see that parking exists on both sides of the road, and that there is no designated bike lanes. If you go further down, closer to Holcomb Boulevard, you'll see, again, there is still no sidewalk on the left side, which is the east side of the street, and there is curb-tight sidewalk on the right side or the west side of the street. That's common throughout the vast majority of this corridor, and most of the sidewalk missing is on that east side. Then you get a little more, two roadways that are very undeveloped. Front Avenue and Apperson are fairly well developed right now. They just have a few pieces left, but Hunter and Swann have a lot of undeveloped area that we have been over the last few years developing. This is Hunter Avenue. It assumes parking along the street, shared bike with vehicle, and then a separated sidewalk with a landscape strip. The existing right-of-way ranges from 40 to 60 feet. The needed right-of-way for this cross-section is 54 feet, so there are many areas where we do not have the necessary right-of-way at this time. Private development would be required to dedicate that needed right-of-way. And here's what Hunter looks like today. The picture on the left is across from South Fork Water Board and the Hunter Hills subdivision. Hunter Hills was built in 2018. You can see that they built a sidewalk with a landscape strip, and you can see a car parked there. There's enough room for parking there, but there's nothing developed on the east side or the left side of the picture because that development has not occurred yet. However, South Fork Water Board is going through some development right now and will ultimately be required to do widening and sidewalks themselves as they build out their master plan. The picture on the right is a picture of Hunter in a very undeveloped area. There's some developable area on the right side of the picture, which is the west side of the road. And right now there is a few residences on the east side, but ultimately there's no sidewalk, no parking, nothing in this area, and it would ultimately have to be built out to this plan when development or redevelopment occurs. Further down, we're at the intersection on the left side of Cleveland Street and Hunter. This is the subdivision on the right side of that picture is the Laurel Ridge subdivision, which was built in 2019 and 20. You can see that the curb is bumped out for roadside parking there. And then there is no designated bike lane because, again, the intent is for shared bike with vehicles. And then you can see the development would have to be either redevelopment or development would have to build out the east side of the road. The picture on the right is the subdivision much closer to Holcomb. It's called the Hillock Heights subdivision, and it was just built in 2020. And you can see that they have built out their side of the road on the left side of the picture, which is the east side of the road, similar to what happened further up the road on the west side of the road. And so that's how Hunter is incrementally being developed over time, following the cross-section we're proposing, because that's really what fits in this area, and that allows us to be consistent. The last cross-section I'm going to show you is Swann Avenue. Swann Avenue is envisioned to have bike lanes independent of the vehicle area and would have no curbside parking. It would have separated sidewalks with a landscape strip. And the only time that landscape strip would not be used is if there's an environmental reason, such as a slope or a landslide deposit or a natural resource that would need to be protected. So I'm going to show you some examples of that. Oh, before I go into that, 40 to 60 feet of existing right-of-way, 58 feet is needed to do this cross-section, and so there are areas where right-of-way will be needed. Here's what Swann Avenue looks like today. The picture on the left, had a hard time taking this picture because of how to get the right elements in here with trash day out there. But what you're seeing in that picture is on the right side, you see a separated sidewalk with what's actually a natural resource swale in the middle. And then once you get up to the road, it's actually curbed there, and there's actually a wide area that actually has a bike lane with an actual bike symbol in there. You can't see it in the picture, but that is what's there. And then you have a basic 2-lane road beside that. There's only one of 2 areas on Swann that does that. The other is the picture on the right, and that is up against Holcomb Boulevard. And on the west side of the road, there's a widened area. It does not have any substantial striping there. They did not put the striping down, but that is all built appropriately for the separated bike lane from the lane of travel. The rest of Swann generally looks like this. A lot of Swann looks like the picture on the left, a 2-lane road without any improvements, very narrow, and you see a lot of vegetation, a lot of swales, but there are numerous areas that can develop there, and the idea would be that they create separated bike paths as well as the sidewalks and make that a full urban improvement. The picture on the right is also near South Fork Water Board on the other side of the road. And that's where you can see Swann, actually just north of there, is fully developed. You can see in the background a sidewalk on the left side, and then you can easily see the sidewalk on the right side there, and everything is built out and widened out. Not necessarily striped at this point, and that was probably intentional to try and not cause confusion. A lot of times it's easier to stripe when it's all done or a significant portion is, but it's all there and ready to have those improvements done. So to finish out the study, we were looking at sidewalks and their priorities. At the beginning of this presentation, you saw where a lot of deficient sidewalks were, generally Swann and to the west. And so we were asked really by the community to do a prioritization plan of if money became available for a capital project, where could we place sidewalks that would be the most advantageous for the community. One thing you should know is that when a house is built, so for those lots, they're individual lots that are vacant, that a house is built, that person wanting to build that house is required to spend up to 10% of the value of their house on frontage improvements. That typically results in sidewalk. It typically does not result in all of the other parts of the improvement, such as the bike lanes or the widening and things like that. But we usually try and get the sidewalk as a minimum, or at least a fee in lieu, depending on the situation. The other situation that occurs is when development occurs, then they're required to do all improvements, and so therefore that's no big deal. In the situation of a capital improvement, what would happen is the funds would be set aside. It would be determined then how much money we have, and then we would take the sidewalk priorities and start looking at, we have priority 1 and priority 2. We would look at priority 1 and say, what are the easiest ones to build? There's no environmental impacts. There's no, we have the right of way. There's no impact to a private property. And ones that are closer to a school or a church or a convenience store, something that's an amenity that will help people get from one place to another. That's where we would start first if we got that first influx of funds. And then you would continue forward after that. So the question is, well, how much money are we talking about? How much deficiency is there? We have estimates here that the priority 1 roadways, which does not mean sidewalk on both sides of the street. It typically means on one side of the street to try and get the community from one place to another. And this is really in the CIP realm of things. There's 7,600 lineal feet of sidewalk that's really missing that we designated as priority one, and that results in over $2 million of improvements. Priority two, which are a little more difficult, which may require some right-of-way, which may require some negotiating with various homeowners, is almost 5,700 lineal feet and somewhere around $1.7, $1.8 million of improvements in today's dollars. Assuming this would be built out over time, if funds became available, that those numbers would grow over time. And so that's everything that's in the study. There are little details that I didn't go over, a lot more that hopefully you were able to read in the exhibit that we provided. But tonight we're here for any questions, and if this is something that you don't have a substantial amount of questions on and you would like to proceed with adoption of an ordinance to approve the plan, we would suggest the next commission date of December 15th, next Wednesday, as the first reading, and then potentially a second reading on either the 5th or the 19th as the schedule allows. So John and myself are here with any questions.
All right. I know I have a few questions. Do others have questions? Commissioner Donald.
On those two priorities in the preceding slide, did you do a breakdown of what you believe the potential future sources of funds are? They are, some element will be from the private sector and some will be from other sources.
What we did in the report, I'd probably like to make a distinction that if private development occurs, they're on the hook for the cost of those improvements. And so, the best case scenario is that private development builds it all and gets those sidewalks in, and then no money out of the city's pocket. There's going to be some gaps no matter what, that there is no development available for that area. We designated in the report various funding sources, such as grants like Safe Routes to School, or other small amounts of types of funds out there. Grant funds are not plentiful for sidewalk projects. Safe Routes to School is probably the best one out there. Every now and then you can find a special grant that comes up when the state or someone else finds that it's an important thing to start enhancing sidewalks, and they'll have a one-time grant for something like that. But besides that, really, it's probably any of our public works funds, as well as if it felt appropriate to provide general funds or any other funding that would be available to be used. We did not designate where it would come from, because that's kind of a second question. Do you have anything to add to that, John? Yep.
I was just curious that, say the $2 million, how much of that, what percentage was anticipated to come from private development, and what percentage we thought the city would end up having to fund? We're not prepared to answer that tonight, I understand.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment.
Commissioner Morrow? Commissioner McGriff?
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. I did get through the entire report, and with those changes that you had specified from the previous meeting, I think that it's very thorough. I think one of the questions that I had, and maybe it was a result of some citizen comments, and I appreciate the fact that you put the matrix in here. There was a concern about parking. So with the streets that are basically unimproved, obviously they're parking kind of wherever they can on the side of the road or in front of their houses. So was that one of the concerns, that people did not have sufficient off-street parking, or excuse me, on-street parking on these substandard streets? Was that one of the concerns? I mean, in the older areas of Park Place, obviously there isn't a density problem in terms of, people not having driveways or garages or whatever. It's basically there's no there in terms of the street.
It wasn't something that really was talked about significantly. It felt more like a passing comment in most of the public comment that we heard. But I don't have a solid answer for that, because it just wasn't something that really came came up as a major issue. I think the one thing that we did ask was for Apperson and Front Avenue, we said, you know, would you rather take away the parking and have separated bike lanes? Or in the Apperson case, would you rather widen this so that you can have either bike lanes or parking? And the general answer on both of those from the survey results ended up being no. They liked the section that was there and did not want to lose what already was there. But they also did not want to increase it and become even more urbanized. So there was a happy balance it seemed like the public was looking for. Again, the majority, not all, because we didn't have 100% on each one, which is expected. But I think that's where most of that parking comment really came from, was the Front Avenue question of switch it from that to bike lanes, or maybe just one side bike lanes or something like that. And we were generally told, no, we want the parking on this road.
Want the parking.
Yeah.
Okay, this couple more. So then one of the other things that was brought up was, I believe that the majority of Park Place is 25 miles per hour. So I'm not sure where there was, other than Holcomb, where there was concern about speed limits. I know that maybe some of the residents were concerned about the street being widened because they thought people might go faster. I mean, they already kind of go fast now anyway, and they're not widened. So I think that you've adequately addressed the speed issue, and I know that we were doing a speed study on Holcomb Boulevard to get that reduced. So I thought that was okay. I think the thing that was really well done, in my opinion, was being able to have the flexibility or allow for you to have the flexibility as staff to look at each of the areas on a case-by-case basis, because each street has its own set of what I would call conundrums. And so it's not going to be a standard, but I think probably there was some mention of concerns about like the picture you showed that showed the fence. Obviously that might have been the edge of the right of way. So there is in places room to adequately expand the street where it needs to be expanded versus places where we can't. I mean, I know a couple of times in there, you know, I was coming down the street and somebody else was coming down the street and I thought, okay, where am I going with my car in order for them to safely pass? So that, you know, I'm hoping we can remedy some of those situations. So at least at a low speed, you can pass somebody without having to pull over onto, I don't know if that was the right of way or their front yard or whatever it was. It was just like, oh my God, another, you know, especially with the big wide ones. So I think that was good. And I think you've answered all my questions from the previous one and made those changes. And when we get to it, I would be prepared to support this. So thank you.
Good evening, Josh. I have a few questions. I'll just run down them. So in your graphic, you had quite a number of proposed right-of-way amounts. Is the additional roadway only going to be acquired if the new development happens, or is there a plan by the city to try to actively acquire additional right-of-way? How do you see that going?
I see that going as, the vast majority of this plan is likely going to be implemented by private development. And so when private development comes in, they have to dedicate the right-of-way when they develop. The only case I foresee that potentially changing is if there ends up being a need in the future, and it doesn't seem imminent to me, but it may, depending on the desires and directions of the commission. But there may be spots where there is no development, and so how do we finish out a piece? And then at that point, the city would need to find the right-of-way at that time. But we have no plans at this time to go try and seek that right-of-way now. It would be better use of our time right now to see private development seek that. And then, even with the sidewalks, if we were to do a sidewalk project, we would go after those areas that already have the right-of-way.
Okay. And then if you could go back in your slides to the graphics from the survey, of the survey results, if that's possible.
Let's see if Jacob can do that for me, because the buzzer stopped.
It's kind of far back in your, there, wait, there. So on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm trying to understand how you have 91% and 57%. I assume both of those are answering the same question.
So the difference in those questions is 91% of the residents say that they use a car daily. 57% say that they walk daily.
Okay.
They all use the road. We were trying to get a sense of, how many people walk, therefore, how big of a priority is it to have sidewalks? And that, 57 is a large number.
Okay.
But clearly cars outweigh even pedestrians in how people use the streets.
Okay. Yeah, I was reading that and putting more emphasis on the word travel versus just using it. So, but that's fine. And then my second question is somewhere in here, and it's probably not on this slide, but that's okay. You mentioned family-friendly routes. Can you tell me what makes a family-friendly route versus other routes?
Okay. Jacob, could you go to the screen that's called the Roadway Classification Plan? Oh, perfect, right there. So everything in the bright green color are designated as family-friendly routes. And those are streets such as Hiram, that you saw a picture of the narrow street, that what we heard from the community, that it was the desire of the community to keep that rural, plus a lot of Hiram, not all of it, but a large amount of it is already developed. And so there's really no room to put bike lanes, parking areas, even a wider street. They appreciate the fact that the street is narrower, which means people will drive slower, but they would like to see sidewalks if possible. And so what we would be doing in those family-friendly route streets is have potentially either an at-grade or a curb-tight sidewalk to provide a bit of a safer thing. But if it doesn't come to fruition, that's okay, because such the narrow nature of the street and the lack of cars and pedestrians that are using it, because it doesn't act as any type of collector or anything, we heard that they feel safer walking on those streets, and there's less of a need for the sidewalks, which is actually one reason you'll also see in the sidewalk prioritization plan, you don't see a lot of sidewalks on the family-friendly streets, because we heard that they felt safe walking in the street because of the very low amount of vehicles on there and the narrowness of it.
All right. Well, I don't understand that logic, but if everybody else understands it, then great. I mean, for me, I don't consider a family-friendly route one that you have to walk in the street.
I don't get that either.
Okay, oh yeah, I just wondered if it was me. I was like, I'm not with you, but.
So another way to think about that is a family-friendly street is one where you wouldn't mind to have your kids playing soccer in the street. That would be an example. And so therefore, the more you urbanize a street, the more likely you're introducing more cars into the street, the less likely I want my kids out there, and I feel less safe. By keeping it narrow, by keeping it rural, it actually ends up being family friendly, even though all modes join together.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can help us on where it's going. Go ahead.
I mean, I get what you're saying too. So I grew up on a dead-end street in Oregon City. I would have called that as a kid a family-friendly street. We played in the street. We did, we did everything. I guess I'm trying to figure out that that's not what it says. It's a family-friendly route, which I think is different than a family-friendly street. A family-friendly route implies more that, okay, I'm going to get my family, I'm going to get my stroller, and I'm going to walk to the store. That's different than a family-friendly street, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a very good catch, Commissioner. And route is probably the wrong word on there. We should probably revise that to street. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
because the TSP actually has family-friendly routes in it, which is, I think we were trying to match language, and then, but they do mean two different things in this study versus the TSP. Right. The TSP is trying to get families from one place to another, and how do you get there with signage and sidewalks and things, whereas this is really saying, how do we keep, which roads should remain very rural in nature, So they're completely different definitions, and we should probably address that.
Okay, well, that makes more sense of having two completely definitions. It makes me think that we should probably reconsider what we're calling these streets. It doesn't make sense to call these family friendly, and that the idea is that the folks are playing in this, kids can play in the street and all that, or call it a route, I don't know, it's challenging to me to have two documents with two completely different definitions with the same name. And because I'm more aware, like I expected family friendly to be saying, oh, we've built this out with sidewalks and strollers can go on this and it's safe. And we've got even maybe streets, trees that are buffering between pedestrians and cars. Like it's built to be safe. And that's in my mind what family friendly is. So that's why I was just confused by this and I needed some explanation.
One thing I might add, so family friendly is going to be different in a lot of locations, right? So there's what I think we're talking about here, which is narrow streets, not a lot of facilities, cars go slow. Maybe they get converted to one-way streets just to kind of, so there's those kind of options. Typically in our TSP, and we did this a few years ago when we were proposing to actually start implementing some of those family-friendly streets with a lower speed limit. And we were talking about, we were doing what we called audits of these streets. So looking to make sure striping was really well done, make sure the signage was really well done. Maybe sign toppers that kind of indicated you're in a different zone here, maybe a chicane or a circle, So family friendly has got a lot of things that could make it feel such that, not advocating for soccer in the street, but,
Right.
Maybe you're comfortable as a mother in a stroller or a father with a stroller, that goes both ways, that, it's just, I think you feel comfortable because the speeds are super low. Most of the neighbors that are driving that street, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And at night, it's well illuminated.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, I'm like Commissioner Smith. I grew up riding my bike right down the middle of the roads and building ramps right on the roads and all that, So, I mean, that's kind of what you do when you're 10, right?
Parallel Smith?
Yes.
I think what didn't alarm me about it wasn't called a family-friendly street. It was called a route. And so I just assumed that meant, okay, this is a way that people are going to get from point A to point B, because my definition of a family-friendly street is exactly what you said. It's built, it's sidewalks, so that, now you see these strollers that they make, they're like mini joggers, so you could go off wheeling with them. But yeah, I understand that. You might, like you say, may put a little asterisk next to that and say, this is a path, not a quote-unquote family-friendly street.
I think Commissioner Smith provided some feedback on that. All right, so I'm going to move on to my next question. So you have quite a number of roads that it look like already have the right-of-way that's needed. That's what you mentioned and you showed in your pictures. Is there a plan to stripe those and add the sharrows and stuff maybe in advance of development, or is that also going to wait on proposed development?
I will defer to Mr. Lewis there.
Yeah, so no, striping, things like sharrows, those things are things that could go in more.
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Things like striping or sharrows, those are things that could go in sooner, much sooner.
Okay.
We've done some of that in the Kenema neighborhood, for instance, so they're low-cost items.
Okay. And then my last question is, how did you decide which roadway cross-section applied to which roads? You showed us multiple roads with different, was it based on existing right-of-way that was available on average, or feedback from the community, or how did you decide?
Yes, it was, we had a consultant do this plan. You see their name on there, Wallace Engineering. What we asked them to do was look at the roads physically and just get a general nature of a feel of the road. We asked them to look at the various obstructions, from proximity of houses to environmental hazards, and then said, which ones are going to be able to be built out per the TSP, and it's no question. Okay, if so, great. That's what we want to use when we can, because that's what code is written for. But with this neighborhood being unique, certain roads we realized cannot meet the TSP, therefore, what should their road be? That's really, we kept asking those questions and going from the 10,000 foot level down to the 5,000, down to the 1,000, to create the 30,000 foot study. As a bit of a joke there, it is an overview study. It's not dialed into every, bit of information, but that was kind of how we did it. Tried to ask questions that got us to that decision until we had a decision.
Okay. All right. I guess that's all with my questions. I guess the last thing I'll say in talking about the parking on the road versus the bike lanes, which is what Commissioner McGriff was talking about. The United States by nature is a vehicle-first society. So that is going to be the response. That's the response that I would expect from every community if we ask them the same question. Would you prefer bike lanes or parking on the street? You're going to get the same answer pretty much, I think, across the community in general. You'll have a majority saying, I want vehicle-first options. So my only comment on that is I think if we're going to provide multimodal options, it's going to likely be the city with the big C, us, making it a priority on specific lanes. That's just my opinion. I just don't think, even with Portland being bike city and bike friendly and all of that, it's still vehicle first. If you ask the community members, the majority, if you did a survey, you would still likely get a majority that voted for vehicle first. And that's just our culture. That's what we're used to. Most families have 2 or 3 cars, and it's just, so anyway, just an observation that I think the city, Big C city, us, will have to decide how we prioritize bike lanes, and, knowing that the community, that there's a section of the community that needs that pedestrian and that piece of it. I'm not saying they go everywhere, and I'm not saying it always trumps. I'm just putting that reminder out there that I think our community in general, our society would generally say vehicles first. So.
Mayor Lowell-Smith, I had a question for Mr. Lewis, if I may.
Sure.
So the one thing that I would say as a 2 or 3 takeaways, one of those 3 would be, so the comment was that we are going to be relying on private development to do some of this infrastructure improvement as properties develop. So what are your thoughts about, should that occur and when that occurs, that we would partner up so that we don't have these unequitable gaps? So let's say somebody's developing and they've got 2 or 3 lots and we've got sidewalk, we've got a gap, we've got some sidewalk down there. Makes sense to me that we would take a look at that and say, we have an opportunity to fill in that in between. Is that something that we can consider, or I think we should consider it?
And we have considered that. So I agree with you that looking for opportunities, we do it with our, we've done it with pavement maintenance projects where, man, all we need is we've got a long road. I'm thinking of, I think it's Partlow Road, where we had a long roadway section there and it had 6 or 7 gaps. And it was like, oh, can we just get those filled? And we got all of them but one. And we worked with those property owners to do that. And one property owner held out and still doesn't have it. But I think it's trying to take those opportunities without paying a small fortune for condemnation, or trying to do that and working with the property owners that will allow us to do that. Because, yeah, you're right. It's a transportation facility, and we've got transportation SDCs that can cover, do that, and we have done that, and we'll continue to seek out those opportunities. I'm trying to remember, there was a development that I just sent Josh an email on that I was like, if there's any way we can work with that developer to complete this, let's, we don't have to, negotiate with them over right away. That makes it a heck of a lot easier. And then it's just a matter of the design work and the construction work, right? That's kind of easier. So we've done that, and we try to do that when the development comes in the door.
Yeah, I think that, you are taking advantage of opportunities where there are economies of scale. I'm glad to hear that, because I just don't want us to totally be relying on the development community to put in all of this, because we know that our economy is cyclical, and it's not that I want us to be in a downturn, but, you know, obviously what goes up comes down. And so if we have an opportunity to do that, that's really great. And I think it's beneficial for the community all the way around, that, you know, it's definitely safer to be, in my opinion, on the sidewalk. Because I tell you, you know, you drive around town and you see those people that are buying those little plastic turtles that say slow children. I don't think that's the alternative we want to be promoting, because we don't want people to think that our children in our town are slow. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Hopefully, this will be brought to us next week on our next meeting, and we'll have a successful conclusion now that we all have our questions answered. And if you have any final things for Mr. Wheeler or Mr. Lewis, make sure you get it to them before next week. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item on the agenda is our Oregon City Economic Development Strategic Plan. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. So I'll ask our Rec Dev team to come up. And so this is the review of the Oregon City Economic Development Strategic Plan, executive summary. So an introduction to the work that's being done in meeting, preparing this strategy for citywide. We've talked quite a bit about portions of this that you'll see included in here related to tourism. But this is really trying to put together a comprehensive plan for addressing economic development opportunities in the city. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Graham.
Thank you.
To go from there.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the Oregon City Commission, City Manager, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Graham, Economic Development Manager, and with me tonight is also Ann Griffin, who is the Economic Development Coordinator, and the both of us will be making a presentation tonight and answering your questions.
Good evening.
The Economic Development Strategy is a 5-year strategy for Oregon City. And before we start, I just wanted to mention that this is an executive summary. You will be given the larger document before either December is over or the first full week in January. It's over 60 plus pages. It's a fairly large document. But we wanted to present to you an executive summary so that we could have a discussion about strategies and goals and opportunities. This is a perfect opportunity to focus on those kind of big picture issues. The other thing I wanted to mention that, like any good plan, this will change. It has to as circumstances change. And so it's designed to be flexible. The other thing about this is all of our data that we have is referenced in the larger document. We've referenced all of the data so that you will understand and know where it's coming from. And the last point I'd like to make is we're already implementing parts of this plan anyway. So, because you don't have to wait until a plan is over in order to implement it. So I'm glad to report that. Our discussion we'll have a discussion about next slide. Thank you. We will have a discussion about the vision. We'll give you some insight in terms of our assessment of Oregon City's economy. We'll look at we did a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that the city faces. And we'll look at the 5 primary economic development strategies that we have listed here, business retention and expansion, all the way down to tourism. And then, of course, we'll have questions and that type of thing. But in terms of the vision, by 2027, Oregon City will have a robust and resilient and diversified economy. And people who live here residents will live and work and play while having access to multiple amenities within the region. Now, the business community will be seen as flourishing because there's a business-friendly environment that supports for-profit enterprise and nurtures private nonprofit entities. For those who are seeking employment, they're able to get employment because the investments have been made to hire them. The Oregon City 2040 Comprehensive Plan revision describes Oregon City as also vibrant, diversified, and resilient. And this plan accepts and shares those aspirations. Next slide, please. In terms of the assessment of our economy, we have approximately 17,800 people working in our workforce, and approximately 1,500 businesses. A quarter of the labor force is in public administration. And I would like to say something about that because it's important to diversify the economy as much as you can. And sometimes there are communities that have a lot of people working in public service. That can also be a challenge for the economy because private industry provides the opportunity to grow the economy through a multiplier effect. Businesses create other businesses, other opportunities. So if you have too many people working in the public sector, if something happens to the government, taxes go down, chances are the government is going to have to pull back resources. And that can happen in that situation. Next slide, please. In terms of unemployment, our unemployment rate in Oregon City is actually, as of October 2021, is 3.3%. And that comes, and at the highest level we experienced in Oregon City was 13.4% in 2020 of April. And so our unemployment rate right now is fairly low. In terms of wages, Clackamas County, the average wage in Clackamas County is about $76,000, a little over $76,000. And in Oregon City, a little over $71,000. And in Oregon as a state, $59,000. So Oregon City, from an average wage position, is doing fairly well in terms of the state and a little less than the county itself. Next slide, please. Our population is growing. It's growing slowly, less than 1%, and that's okay, because you really don't want your population to grow too quickly because of all of the apparent things that could happen with a fast-growing population. As I mentioned, our economy is diverse, but it's not diverse enough. And small businesses have, on average, 10 or fewer employees in this city. The wages in the community are also growing. Our median household income in 2018 was a little over $71,000, and it was a little over $76,000 in 2019. So it's growing. I think that's a 19% increase over a one-year period. It's truly growing. As I mentioned, a good portion of our workforce is in public service. Relative to the county, residents of Oregon City tend not to finish higher levels of education beyond high school. Next slide, please. Trends. Our SWOT analysis. Relative to the county, residents of Oregon City tend not to finish higher levels of education beyond high school. The SWOT analysis, in terms of strength, Oregon City, as a community, we're in a very good location geographically. We have access to important markets within the region, and of course, Salem is not too far. Portland is not too far. The airport is not too far. We're in a pretty good location as a community. Our transportation infrastructure assets are also a strong point of our community. Businesses in Oregon City can easily access markets in the Portland region, as well as to other markets much more broadly. The cost of doing business in Oregon City is actually relatively less than in Portland and some of the other communities around us. In terms of weaknesses, there is not a month that goes by that I don't get a request from a potential investor or potential business that is seeking land, but they're seeking land that's of ample size, usually between 17, 18 acres minimally. And unfortunately, Oregon City does not have a lot of that. They're also, these investors also are seeking flex space. The minimum flex space is 50,000 square feet is what, in terms of what their ask is. We also get inquiries from Greater Portland, Inc. In terms of inquiries about investment in Oregon City and other places, and this is generally what they've been asking for. Opportunities. Tourism and outdoor recreation are opportunities that we should take advantage of. And tourism and our outdoor assets will provide a chance to grow and a chance to develop our those economies greater. The Urban Renewal District is also an important opportunity for Oregon City. Threats. The pending downtown courthouse relocation is a threat. Its relocation, although it, of course, will stay in Oregon City, it's far enough from downtown to have an impact, a negative impact on the restaurants and other businesses that have come to rely on the courthouse and its business. Threats. Another threat is the rising cost of development. We have to be careful about the cost because of development, because the higher the cost, at some point development will either slow and maybe in some cases stop. Skilled labor force constraints. In this economy, we've always had skilled labor force constraints. Young people are not replacing their elders in certain, particularly in skilled labor. People are leaving work, they're retiring, and young people are not replacing them in numbers that are sufficient. And also, we have to be concerned about the perception we portray in terms of a business-friendly environment. If we don't portray that we are welcoming to businesses, the word will get around, and at some point, when we really need them most, the business community will be concerned about how friendly we have been and are. Slide, please. So, the 5 primary strategies, we wanted to talk to you about these strategies and have a good discussion about this, because it's important to realize that economic development is not a science, it's an art. And it is one that if you practice it long enough, and if you engage the community as well as the business community enough, you really will get a sense and a feel for the economy and where it's going. So the first up is business retention and expansion, or BRE. Our goal, next slide, please, thank you. Goal 1, we want to retain and support local business growth of target industry clusters. Our strategy is to meet 5 businesses every quarter in terms of the target industry clusters. Another strategy is to focus on, is to develop and distribute business resource kits. We want to make sure that we provide information to the business community as to what services are available, not only on the city level, but also on the county level and also on the state level. Our target cluster industries are manufacturing, healthcare, logistics or warehousing, and professional and scientific professions, and tourism. Our 4th strategy, we want to, when we engage our business community, we want to catalog their relationship. We want to document it, and we want to respond to their needs as we know and learn of them. Now, there are certain needs that will be beyond the city's control, but just as long as we are a listening ear and we are empathetic to their needs, I think that will go a long way in portraying a business-friendly environment. In terms of milestones, we want to start this process earnest March of 2022, and by the end of 2022, we would have met with 20 businesses in our target industry cluster. Right. Goal 2, we want to support the development of a systemic skills, training, and job placement network. What that means is there are a lot of organizations out there that provide workforce skill development. And it's an alphabet soup. It's a lot of entities. And we've talked to just about all of them in Oregon City and around. And they have been very, very frank with us confidentially about how they view how the system is working. And we have a large group of young people between the ages of 18 to 35. And a good number of them have checked out. They don't know where to go. They know that we have a community college. They have not accessed the community college for whatever reason. There are a lot of organizations that have not reached them. They're not talking to us. They're not talking to you. And so they're there. And there's no denying they are there. And so we want to work with all of these organizations so that for a better system. It's fragmented. They would admit that. It is a system that is, they all have their own forms. They're collecting the same information, and they give this different forms to all these people, and people just don't want to see how sausage is made. They just want to eat it, and they want help. And that's what we want to do. We need to focus on them instead of our logos. And that's where we're coming from. We want to make a system that's almost seamless. And with that, we have been working and talking with a variety of these organizations, quite frank, in a very frank discussion. And they all seem to be supportive of what we want to launch. It's called Talent Ready. And Talent Ready is exactly that, a systemic approach to workforce development. Our milestone, in doing this type of work, it's important to have written agreements between all the parties so that they understand what their responsibilities are, what our responsibilities are to the client. And that's what has been missing. It's one of the major things that's missing in the system. There are no agreements. We also want to make sure that we involve the employers. We want to recruit employers into this system, certainly as many as we can by 2022. Now, we have talked to employers, and they are also in favor of what we're talking about, because they also recognize the fragmented nature of the system that we have. And then we want to market Talent Ready. And that's what the contribution that this Oregon City provides, a way of marketing a system that works for the client, whether it's the business or whether it is the individual. And we want to be able to do that by June of 2023. Next slide. This is only a sampling of some of the people and entities that we've talked to and have agreed to work with us on Talent Ready. And there are certainly others, but I just wanted to give you an indication of the breadth of the entities we're talking about. A lot of them are nonprofits. One interesting thing about Talent Ready is that it involves the mental health professional as part of this process, because the mental health profession has not been asked to be a part of workforce development. And there are a lot of people who need help in that department, not because there's anything necessarily wrong with them, but we all have issues when it comes to mental health. And we want to remove that stigma so that people can assess their abilities in the field that they wanted to pursue. Next slide, please.
All right, well.
Goal 3, I'll turn this over to you.
The next goal and set of strategies is something I'm going to share with you, and that is related to increasing childcare opportunities for young people in our community, particularly kids that are pre-kindergarten age, 0 to 5. And some people say, is that really a business development issue? And it is, in that workers won't be secure. They won't be able to go to work if they don't have a safe place for their kids to be. And I think the pandemic has showed us all that the challenges that working parents face when our kids aren't at school. So the strategies here, we're going to be conducting a feasibility study to look at particularly employer-based childcare in Oregon City. And if there's a way that we could support a public-private partnership to work with some employers that are interested in expanding on-site childcare facilities for their workers. Second strategy is to develop a childcare forgivable loan program, which will act as a grant program and help us address the issue of affordability for childcare. And the third strategy is to actually recruit a new childcare provider. And there's actually one company that we're working with right now that would like to open up a second facility in Oregon City. And it speaks to some of the issues James was saying about finding space. So we're trying to locate a facility that for 50 kids that has access to outdoors. One of the milestones here is talking about finding an employer-based childcare facility, so identifying 3 to 5 employers that would be interested in helping pool resources to create this kind of facility. And we have started some of those conversations preliminarily, and if it were to move forward, we would have to do a very much more thorough assessment. So that's something we'll be doing in the coming year and a half. Second milestone, attracting 1 to 3 new childcare providers to Oregon City. And then the third, as I mentioned before, a forgivable loan fund that would support childcare businesses. That's something we want to have in place early spring of 2022. And I get the next goal as well, goal 4, to establish and promote what's called an Ombudsman business advocacy program. So James mentioned a moment or two ago that there's some perceptions around the business friendliness of the city, Oregon City, right or wrong, right? And what an ombudsman would do would be an advocate for businesses. Now, I want to say, our folks that we interface with people in the public all the time, whether you're reading a water meter or issuing a permit, and folks work really hard and do a good job. Sometimes it might also just be a matter of how we communicate with each other. Are we getting information to our client, the public, as quickly as possible? Second strategy is maintaining a database so that we can, again, track this interaction with companies. So first milestone is this sort of customer service that we would like to launch in the first quarter, the end of the first quarter next year. And again, it might not necessarily be how to be more friendly to the customer, but how do we work more efficiently together as we are serving the public. Second milestone would be to establish this, basically a standard operating procedure for interactions with businesses. We wear the hat of small business assistance providers, and we meet with companies on a regular basis, helping establish just those regular operating guidelines. And then a CRM program, I think James mentioned also. It just helps us maintain so we can report back how many companies have we talked to in the last quarter? How did we help them? How much money did we spend? What did we do? Obviously, we keep records of all of that now, but I think a more robust CRM system than what we currently use would be very beneficial.
Before you leave that slide, we also want to mention that in terms of Ombudsman, we're not saying that we want to get involved in every complaint. That would be overwhelming for anybody. Our goal is to identify the level and degree of issue that warrants an Ombudsman's involvement. And so that's the idea, that you don't get involved with everything. You get involved, you choose how you want to help and how you can't help, because no one has that kind of resource to get involved with everything. And also to make sure that we interface with all our departments. All of our departments work fairly hard, and they do what they can to help the customer. But sometimes the customer isn't aware. They go too far in their projects, and then they look up and they've gone too far, and then they come to the city asking for relief for things that have already happened. And so now you have a situation where someone has gone too far without getting information about what's necessary. So it's an education process for the business community and the customer ahead of time, not just at that moment. Next slide, please.
Next slide's back to you, James.
Thanks. So business attraction is the bread and butter of economic development. And this is where the art comes in, because it is definitely not a science. But one of the important things to do is to establish an inventory of available property for purchase and development. We have to have something to sell. And if we're going to approach a business, we need to be able to say, this is the kind of property we want you to develop. This is the kind of thing that we can do for you. This is the type of labor force we have. And we can demonstrate that we have at least a system to provide a trained labor force if we don't have the labor. Identify properties for purchase by the city. The only way that the city will have full control of its future is that it owns property. When you rely too heavily on private owners of property, you don't have control over your city. You just don't. And so that can be one person who holds a lot of property can hold your city hostage. And that's a challenging situation. Our third strategy is to develop a marketing strategy to attract companies within that targeted industry cluster that I had mentioned. We also want to establish a new economic development website, and we've already started some work on that. One that looks more corporate than it does city. One that that provides a lot of information about our community and how to interact with the customer. The customer it needs to be interactive. If you have a question, send it on the website. If you have property you want to look at the properties on the website so that you can see how much it costs, how large it is, who owns it, so that you can see what we have to offer in our community as property. And then the fifth strategy is to develop and implement the Urban Renewal District Plan. Milestones, next slide, thank you. Milestones associated with that is a property inventory in terms of attracting new business by February of 2022, and to identify property owners for city ownership. Identify property for city ownership, and that's going to be an ongoing process. We want to implement a business attraction strategy by March of 2022, and we want a new economic development website up and running by February of 2022. And then hopefully we'll be able to complete an urban renewal district plan by April of 2022. Next slide. Our next goal has to deal with the infrastructure of the 21st century, and that is fiber optic technology. And it's important that we examine the potential of establishing fiber optic networks to not only to the businesses, but to homes as well. Because as we go into the future, people have learned now that they're going to be working, some people will be working from home. And they need the type of internet, they need the type of broadband that moves quickly and can move data quickly. Not only that, companies need the type of broadband that they can move data quickly and do videos without having to see a buffering situation going on with their conference calls. So our strategy here is to develop an RFP to identify a broadband consultant to conduct a feasibility study. Our second strategy is to identify a broadband consultant to begin the work. And thirdly, to complete a feasibility study. Now, the RFP has already been done, and we have distributed to 5 broadband consultants. And we want to identify a broadband consultant by January of 2022, and then complete the feasibility study by August of 2022. And you have the next one.
I do. Then in category 3 in the economic development strategy is supporting entrepreneurship. And the goal here is to provide greater access to technical assistance to some of the small businesses, particularly startup companies in Oregon City, companies between 1 to 3 years old. And one strategy to do that is to actively partner with some technical assistance providers to support these businesses. I've been supporting and working with small businesses a good chunk of my career, and I know a lot of folks will start an XYZ company without having all the training that they need in bookkeeping or human resources or something else. They start a shoe shop because they want to sell shoes, but they don't think about the other stuff. And so providing them with resources assists them quite greatly. And in particular, we've identified some partners. One is Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, which is a great nonprofit. They've just started working with clients in the Clackamas County in the last year and a half, which is really exciting. And then also the Oregon State Extension Program and something called the Oregon Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is also a nonprofit that does great work providing technical assistance to folks that are in assembly and manufacturing. So those are 3 partners that we've identified that we would like to make some of their services available to businesses in Oregon City. So the milestone is figuring out exactly how to do that. We will be establishing partnership agreements with those 3 entities before the end of February in the new year.
And I'd like to also say that I serve on the board of directors of MESO, and I know a lot about their work, and they are a very good organization, and they have a very good reputation. So I'm glad to serve with them, and I'm glad to have them here in Oregon City to do the work with our businesses. Next slide, please. Small Business Procurement Initiative. There are a number of cities that have that seem to have this initiative, and it's actually a direct way that the city itself can get involved and help small businesses. Now, when we say small businesses, we're talking about 25 or fewer employees. We're talking about women and minority-owned businesses, as well as general standard small businesses. And then also, we are asking that all departments look at their purchases for goods and services and think of small businesses like this. Because a lot of cities, and I'm not sure about this one, but a lot of cities have a tendency to have one vendor that they've worked with for years and they never change it. They got comfortable with Joe, and Joe has been providing them the same service for years. And so therefore, and Joe has a good price, seemingly, until they go out and look and find that Joe's price is not exactly the best, and Joe's service is not greatly the best. So this is an opportunity for us to change our habits, because when we continue to deal with the same people year in, year out, you cut out a lot of other people from doing business with you, including women and minority-owned businesses. Entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. Entrepreneurship goals and strategies. It's important to grow your own economy. And the one way to do that is to help people with startups. Now, when we say startups, we're talking about businesses that are 1 to 3 years old. And the strategy here is to use the procurement program also to help those kinds of businesses grow. And to develop program guidelines is a milestone associated with procurement, November 2022, and to market the procurement program by January 2023. In terms of entrepreneurship, money is always the issue with a lot of small businesses. And we're looking at developing a program where money has to be patient for small businesses. The banking community is not interested in lending to small business startups. That's something that they just don't want to do. It's risky, yes, but you've got to grow your garden. And so therefore, knowing small businesses as I do, I know that many of them need patient money. And we're looking at a program that provides up to $25,000 with a deferment of 1 year, a 5-year repayment over 3 points above prime. Now, these are not all the guidelines, but this is simply a taste of what we're looking at as we continue to develop the guidelines to support entrepreneurship. The Urban Renewal District, its goals. You all are familiar with that because you and I have, and the city manager and others have been working together on this. And so our goal has always been to develop a vision statement and framework for decision-making on new projects. And our strategy has been to do this through our retreats. And the milestone is to develop a new vision statement and a framework for decision-making by December 2021. And then we want to revise the existing plan. And one of the things we need to do is there's a financial component to this plan, which represents a great deal of the document. And so as the city manager had mentioned to you at the last, city commission meeting, that we're looking at hiring a consultant to help us update the financial components of this document. And who knows, maybe we'll have a revised plan by April 2022. Tourism. Next slide, please, yes. There is, as you know, there is a separate tourism strategic plan, but it is part of economic development. And we want to develop, strengthen, and grow the tourism industry in Oregon City. And that is several ways you can do that. And one is to establish the OC Tourism Network, which we have established it, and it changes shape and participation from time to time. But also we want to establish, and we've already established the Concierge Institute, and that has started and is getting some favorable reviews in terms of training our sites, historic sites, our museums, to be ready to greet our visitors. They need to be open, they need to have a schedule, and they need programming, and they need to charge, and they need to be self-sufficient. So those are the goals associated with getting them there. And to get them there, the Concierge Institute can be a good service to them. The training started already, and it will end, this first cohort class will end in January or February of 2022. Next slide. A brand. We do need a brand for tourism, and there are several ways to do that. And we already talked about a full-fledged marketing campaign, which is destination ready, and is our intent we've already implemented and to carry that through. But this summer, when summer comes, it will be a very aggressive effort to market Oregon City. Now, you've already seen the commercial. We have our first commercial out, and we've gotten very good responses from this commercial. And the reason why we did that commercial at this time is to get ready for the Christmas and the New Year's season, and to invite people to dine, to shop, to come home. And that's the slogan of the commercial and the theme. In terms of community supported sponsored events, we called a group of some of the tourism network together, and they helped me identify some underlying principles to start with guidelines. I don't have those principles with me, but there are about 9 principles that they were very instrumental in helping me with developing, and we'll use those principles to develop the guidelines. A new tourism website is now up and running, and we will continue to keep that running and keep that up to date, because we want to make sure that it's useful. And then the second round of community showcase is scheduled for February 2022, and I think you all are familiar with the community showcase. It was a success, and a lot of restaurants really liked it because they saw people that they had not seen before come into their restaurant, and that was a win-win for them and win-win for the customer. And we want to increase the visitor experiences in Oregon City. I mean, we have lots of restaurants, a lot of nice restaurants, but people want to do something more than eat. And they want experiences, and they want to do things. Young people of all ages want experiences, whether it's a thrill, outdoor experience, or whether it's something more mundane, but people want an experience. So we will identify businesses and organizations outside of Clackamas County to relocate to Oregon City to provide those kinds of experiences. And we will create an attraction package by February of 2022, and our goal is to attract 1 to 3 new visitor attractors by June of 2023. The arts. We know that by having strong support of the arts, you help retail. Art and retail seem to complement each other. The other thing about the arts, it has a way of attracting high value or dollar value customers. And the arts also has a way of bringing a community together in ways that you couldn't imagine. So we were very glad to see that the Arts Commission has already been reestablished. We've established a new mural arts code. And then we will continue to work with the Arts Commission to develop new initiatives to support the arts. And that will be ongoing. You have a detailed a budget in your packet, but for this presentation, we provided a general overview of the budget. And as you can see, we recognize that you have your two goals as a commission. That is to promote tourism and support economic development to foster community sustainability. And then the other one was support improvements and partnerships that contribute to our hometown feel and showcase Oregon's unique community identity. Our grant budget is $1.3 million, and it's broken down accordingly as you see in your packet and as you see here on the website, on the slide. So that's the economic development strategy as we see it. It will change. It is very, we think it's very aggressive. And we're already implementing pieces and parts of it. So that's the important thing, that it's implemented. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Graham. So I'm sure there's questions. Last time I started at this time, maybe this time I'll start at the other end. Commissioner McGriff, do you have some questions?
I thought the summary was comprehensive, and it's extremely ambitious. I think that's what, as you said, the other document is 60 pages long, so if you're going to be submitting this executive summary elsewhere, I think that you need to cross-reference your citations from the document to this, because most of my questions were, okay, where did this come from? Where did this, what's the source of this information? And I guess the thing that I'm most curious about is that I mentioned, Mr. Graham, that I had been hearing on Oregon Public Broadcasting some information regarding the need for childcare. So you haven't done the feasibility study yet, so where is the documentation that shows that this is a need in Oregon City? Is that in the broader document? You mentioned it many, many times in the summary, but I'm missing sort of the, you got the meat, but I need the bun.
But I jump in a little bit.
I know that it is, obviously having needed childcare myself in the past, I know what the situation is in Oregon City. So I'm assuming when you're talking about childcare providers, are you talking about, I'm going to use a generic term, so we're talking about a kinder care type facility? There's a kinder care like in Westland, and I know there's a childcare facility over by Fat Cupcake, which I think that's a very interesting and weird location for childcare, because I see the kids cruising through the parking lot when I'm at Miller Paint and thinking, okay, is this safe? This is not family friendly. So that would be one. And then we've got our, I thought the chart was very interesting, but Oregon City's workforce by sector. And I know that information came from someplace. So there wasn't any source. I'm not surprised to see that the public sector, now in the chart you call it public administration. Did you mean public sector is 25%?
Yeah,
because I wasn't really sure what you meant by public administration.
Public sector.
So make that change.
Well, I'll take a stab at your
Sure. So let's start with that question.
Your child care question, Commissioner McGriff. I think people can remember that we had two committees working with us as we put the strategy together, both a child care subcommittee and a workforce development subcommittee. A lot of the research information came. There were two members of that subcommittee who were on the Clackamas Education District. And we also worked a lot with the referencing from the Oregon Department of Education, and particularly the Early Learning Division. And we also did some survey work with there are 26, or at least there were 26 childcare providers in Oregon City in past spring when we did a survey of those providers. And the majority of them said that they, could not meet the need, that they wanted to be able to have more slots, that they were, I think there were only two out of the ones that we asked, that we surveyed, are you, and people are saying, no, there's more demand than what we were able to provide.
And I'm assuming these are all licensed, we're not talking
That's
about
right.
in-home care. You're not talking about in-home care.
Well, some of the in-home providers are licensed providers. So in fact, the majority of the child care providers in Oregon City are home-based businesses, which they're serving 10 or fewer children. That's the majority of our licensed businesses in Oregon City. So whether we end up with, smaller, I think it should probably be a combined approach. It's really going to depend on the entrepreneurs who are running the businesses, which, how we answer that question.
I said, we only got the summary, so I did not see the documentation. We've been talking about this for months.
We have, yeah.
And I said, let me see what what's the documentation. Then under your target entrepreneurship item, you have it here, listed here as C, but on there it was 3. So are we talking about memorandums of understanding with these organizations? And I guess in going to another topic, I didn't see in the budget, and maybe you call it something different. So where are the partnership funds? Most of these groups like MESO, the Chamber of Commerce, they're all nonprofits. They are not flush with cash. So if we're looking at partnerships, I'm assuming that we're coming to a partnership with some money. So I didn't see that in how that was broken out in the budget, and maybe it's under a different category, and you can tell me when you get there.
A lot of that is technical assistance provision, and we have been talking with, MESO would be able to meet, they would be looking for new clients. So funding that they might support some of their work at least would be coming from, being able to provide financial services to some of the clients. So
we would provide financial service to the clients, or the
individual businesses that might decide to hire them. So there's some technical assistance that they provide for free, and some technical assistance that that you're right, there is a price tag for.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the work that the chamber's doing on our behalf. They cannot do it without some funding from us. So I'm hoping that's in there somewhere too.
Well, the answer to also the question is that I serve on the board of MESO, and I know that in their business model is actually they do the technical assistance. It doesn't cost, but where they get their funding is if they make a loan,
right,
to that same business, and so that's where their income is. So that technical assistance doesn't cost us anything.
Well, I'm not talking about technical assistance from the provider. I'm talking about if we're asking them to help, I'm assuming that we're going to provide at least a little bit of money on the table to help them help us, so to speak. So that's what I was kind of getting at. I'll pass it on to my colleague to my right, and I have got more, but I'll just hold it with that for now.
Thank you. And thank you, James and Ann. That was very informative. Commissioner McGriff was actually just getting to part of one of my questions, which was you talked about convening CCC, the chamber, do you see the city more as a convening force more than a funding force? I was curious about that a little, so if there was a little more clarification about that.
More of a convening.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was curious about what our role would be in there, so that makes sense, given the scope of what we can do as a local government. I was thrilled to see the childcare details in here, especially the at-work, on-site childcare. That's something that we need to be thinking about in this new age of employment, and so I was really happy to see that. And I would be very interested in looking at how we can at least look at SDCs for childcare providers. That's something that we've looked at as a state, and continuing that conversation at the local level would be great. And then lastly, there was one more. I'm blanking on it right now, so I'll hand it off, but I just wanted to say that, now I'm remembering. So I'm curious about land capacity that we have. I know that we're really restrained. The Oregon Business Council just held their leadership summit, and one of the big things was Intel talking about their task force trying to find industrial land, and I realized that having larger areas of land for this kind of development to occur is a huge issue, but I think that, Oregon City has a history in those blue collar manufacturing and industrial jobs, and I would like to see us retake that history as we see the so-called Silicon Forest come back to the area, but I realize that is a big constraint with land issues, and so I'm excited to see that there's going to be a comprehensive look at those constraints.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. This is a lot. And I'm anxious to look at the bigger version of it because I think there's a lot of great things going on here. I have a pretty good feeling about the business retention, business attraction, entrepreneurship, those sections, just more wanting to know more details in the process of how those are going to work, things like that. I had one thought in the SWOT analysis of the opportunities versus threats. I felt that our biggest opportunity is our biggest threat. We don't list it in the threat column, and that's urban renewal. And my thought on that was, it can be in either one of those columns, depending on how we go through this next few months and this process envisioning and engaging the community. Then when the business ombudsman was mentioned, I thought, man, we might have to have an urban renewal one. Because I think, really that's going to be a delicate process in how we address the citizens' issues with urban renewal going forward. Because I think if we don't do that the right way, it's going to put an end to urban renewal for the foreseeable future, which will take away our biggest, one of our biggest opportunities. So I think that can go in either column. I have a fair amount of questions on tourism, and I'll wait for some of those next time when we get the full document. But the question I have is some of the terms and wording in the documents that we got, I just need to clarify. So when we're talking tourism network, we're really talking about the tourism stakeholders group. That's essentially the same thing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I think we need to be consistent because I think that might confuse people not knowing that, maybe reading that thinking, oh, is there two separate things here? One of the things that I have a question about is the Concierge Institute, which is already underway. I guess what I'm going to try to get at is Destination Ready is got a lot of facets to it. However, one of the facets to it, I think, is very directly tied to original tourism plan, which is at a core supporting the heritage sites. And I know that the Concierge Institute's goal and focus is in that realm. I guess my question is, at the completion of that process, of the concierge process, it was believed that that would end up in some sort of grant process that would be funded, or some way of funding projects in those heritage tourism sites. I don't see that anywhere, and I don't see that process, and I don't see where that funding comes from. Because to me, it's separate from what's listed as, in that gap, or in that list of projects and programs. It doesn't fall there. So is that $100,000 of the Concierge Institute actually that funding? So the $100,000 is not actually doing the Institute. It's that money is for the grants at the end of that process? Is that?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. You hit it right on the
Okay,
head.
I think that needs to be clear, because I know that I think the chamber has been a big part in developing a lot of the concierge pieces of that. And I didn't know if that $1,000 was to pay to put that institute on, or if that's the outcome of it in the end, where that money goes back to these sites.
Well, the chamber's been a good partner, a very good partner, in that their participation in the Concierge Institute, they provided consultants that teach, teachers.
Right.
And so therefore, they paid for that. So our contribution is to use that money that you identified at the end of the process to talk to each site and say, okay, now you've been through the process, you've learned some new techniques, some new strategies. How can we help you stay open? How can we help you develop programming? How can we help you establish merchandising and that type of thing? So because the goal is for those sites is to be self-sufficient at some point. The goal for those sites is to have a regular schedule. So that's the goal.
I think we need more clarity on that, and then on that, how that process wraps up, because I think one of the challenges that we have here is we didn't know what the outcome of the Concierge Institute was, so there was no buy-in for groups to go to all these meetings, and because they don't know what the outcome of it is. Not only that, the expectation that was stated to the heritage sites at the start of it was that there would be this funding at the end. That kind of has been foggy a little bit, but also the idea that in order to get some of that funding, they would have to participate in all these Concierge Institutes, and it's impossible for groups that are struggling to attend 12, 15 meetings over a year's period. So I'm worried that that got started before we really had a full understanding of the buy-in that these groups would have, because I don't know that they really understood that. I also think we need to be careful with the labeling of, in a couple of documents, it's labeled separately. The funding, I believe, with $100,000 was specifically for city-sponsored events, and it's listed in some of this paperwork as community-sponsored events. That's two separate things, and I think that might confuse people to what that means. In my mind, I understand we're going to come up with a strategy and that criteria that would fit city-sponsored events, and then that funding would go to those. But labeling it community-sponsored events, I think, doesn't say that. But I am assuming that's the same thing too, right?
So
okay.
what would be the proper one? Community supported or city sponsored?
I think city sponsored.
Yeah.
Let me just see here. Okay. I think the piece on flexibility and rigidity is obviously crucial. I mean, there's so many things that change in a given year that cause us to change directions. I think the main thing is the communication piece. If we change directions or staff changes directions, that communication is going to be crucial from this department to the commission and to these other stakeholders, that they understand that we're changing directions and the reasons why before we actually get into that direction change. I think that is really crucial, because I think we can shoot ourselves in the foot really easily if we aren't careful with that piece of it. I think I also very much support the marketing pieces and the promotion pieces. I just don't want us to get out in front of our skis. I feel like we probably need to do some work in supporting the businesses that are struggling before promoting them. And I won't specify certain business sectors in Oregon City, but there's some business sectors in Oregon City that are not ready for outside people to come into the community in terms of tourism and in terms of staffing, in terms of being able to deal with groups. And I think that's some in terms of the businesses downtown, in terms of restaurants or shops, or even our tourism sites, putting commercials on for summer shopping and restaurants when restaurants can't handle just a basic, steady, crowd of people. I think we got to be really careful with that. So I think we really need to focus on those pieces first as we go into this. I understand marketing, the Christmas season for some of those key pieces, but I think we really need in the next couple months to really focus on, okay, what are the big needs before we go into the spring ramp up and summer ramp up of, you know, marketing tourism. I think that's the real crucial piece, because if we're not ready by that this first summer that we're kind of all wanting to get out, I think we could be off to the wrong start. And I mean, you know, it's very crucial that we make sure we're supporting our heritage sites that are still closed to be open in those times. And you've mentioned that, and I think I got clarification where some of that help comes from. So I think I'm a little clearer tonight, but I'm anxious to go into that full document a little bit more.
All right, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'd say that my observations are a little bit more global, and they come from years of experience in the private sector. And first question I ask is, how do you measure success? And my thought is, I was responsible for half the United States, and I had a group of engineers that worked for me, and they made many, many contacts. But in the end, the question was, what did you generate to our net revenue? What did you do that built this company? I'm not sure how we're going to measure success. There's a lot of contacts going on, but I don't know what your measurement criteria are going to be. For example, the chamber, I think one of their measurement criteria is we've attracted and landed a new business downtown. That's a success. That's a concrete, measurable success. You know, I mean, if my engineers contacted 20 people and generated no sales, it's like, where's the success in that? I think there's some good things on the retention piece of it. Looks like we're most solid there, but we've been playing that game for over a year, so we should be solid on that. I thought the business attraction slide was good. I noticed that 60% of our budget is dedicated to tourism, and that may be a smart move because we've got a product that's more ready for market than anything else, and that may be a smart, immediate move. I share your pain with no large parcels of land, because I'd like to land something. I've often felt that you can work almost as hard to land a small account as you can a large account. And I recognize that none of this stuff happens overnight. Sometimes these moves are planned years in advance. And in fact, in that light, I think we overlooked one of our strengths in the SWOT analysis, that we omitted the technical education asset we have by virtue of the community college. And that is key. I have lived in the Southeast United States where they pre-trained the workforce for a company that was going to migrate there. And when those people completed that training, they had guaranteed jobs because they successfully completed that training. So I think that's a key element. The thing about all this is not a series of disconnected dots. You know, it's land, it's workforce, it's housing. I mean, people would love to live where they work. I like the daycare piece brings to mind. I was on my travels throughout the United States and visited a woman-owned company in New York, and they provided daycare for all their employees, and that's phenomenal. And I think we're more capable of doing that with a larger employer, unless I believe one of your suggestions was a conglomerate of multiple employers that join together to do that. I want to be careful not to compete directly with people who are already providing that. So I'm not sure how we do that fairly. 50,000 square foot flex piece. That one kind of bothers me because I agree with an inventory of our lands. I mean, what do we have to offer? You know, maybe Urban Renewal should be selling off some of their lands. And of course, everybody here knows I've wanted to do something, and I'm not picking on these folks, but the area down there across from the Rossman landfill is 4 to 6 acres. And should we be selling that off to someone with to say, this is what we want to develop? We want these 50,000 square feet flexible facilities put there. And that would be a term of the sale. I mean, there's 4 to 6 acres. I know it's in the floodplain. I also know there's ways to build in those things that allow you to do that. I think about the total need in America right now, and mentioning Intel was kind of interesting to me because the need for chips in this country and the focus on making chips domestically. And I'm thinking about to train a workforce. We have technical education. We need a piece of dirt. got intel right out there that would be a ready market for the very things we make. I think we need to put the pieces together and not view them as individual components. I know we did a thing, the OCBA did a thing, I believe it was on enterprise zones. I don't know if you were attendance to that. I mean, we need to be creative and we need to put the whole package together. And I'd like to land something other than businesses that are 3 to 5 employees. That's incremental gains are small. I'd like to do something, and I always say this, I'd love to have another Benchmade, something like that. And I know you need the land to do that. So how do we go about that? Do we do a proposal to companies? First, we got to find out who's looking. We do a proposal to them. We talk about, you know, they're always looking for tax relief. Well, maybe they're looking for child care relief. We put that into the offering. I'd be in favor of that. So I got to leave it to the professionals to do that. Other than that, it troubles me that when we talk about Oregon City not being business friendly, I really like specific examples of that because we kind of perpetuate, which might be an urban myth as far as I know. I don't know if we get in our own way or not. If we do, let's have that conversation offline. And I saw what you proposed as far as training for people, but how do we get a big hit? How do we not make these small increments? How do we get the most bang for the money we're about to spend? So I understand the obstacles in your way. I want to think we need to get urban renewal on board. How can urban renewal help this economic growth effort? And hopefully, I don't think it's that hard to identify what we have for land. I think we know, we just need to list it, but we need some parcels of size. If you say you need 15 acres, how do we go about that? Because I also do not want to be held prisoner by private parties. You had the land, you had the educational institution. Urban Renewal can participate in infrastructure to support those things as part of a project that increases the tax base and would not occur but for our investment. Let's put together something and let's go after something substantial. All in all, I think it's a lot to digest and could probably all ramble on forever, but I'll leave it at that and say thank you for the presentation.
All right, thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. I think for the essence of time, I will try to be brief and, you know, I think we all know your emails. We can follow up with you for more questions and more information. My first one is about the forgivable loan program. I'm trying to understand what exactly that program is for. How is it different from the Entrepreneurial Small Business Growth and Retention Fund? Like, why are we offering specifically a forgivable loan versus other funding mechanisms that's offered to other entrepreneurs?
Well, to answer the question is, if you remember, we did something back, it seems like a million years ago, but last year, with debt relief, and it was called the Reimagine Opportunity Loan Fund. And that actually was a loan, but it was forgivable. And we were asking people to reimagine their business. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for Mr. Commissioner O'Donnell, who had got on the soapbox and basically said, "What is wrong with you people? You're going to get you're getting an amount of money to reimagine your business, and so why can't you do that and sit down and get that done? Because you're looking at investment in your own business, and it's coming from a source that you don't have to have to pay back." So therefore, the reason for a forgivable loan is because we do need childcare, and one of the stipulations in this program is to bring down the cost of childcare. So if we make a loan to a childcare facility, they're expected to decrease their cost to the client or to the parents of the child by a certain amount, and then the details have to be worked out. But we also talk to other child care providers, and it makes sense because then they're basically being provided resources to cover a cost, so they can lower their cost and pass that on to the customer. So that's a way of getting people to, that's a way of lowering the cost of childcare. And in one instance, and also in another instance, it's also should be used to attract new facilities to this community. So we're coming at it from both ways, lowering the cost and increasing the number. And if you increase the number over time, you're going to bring down the cost anyway, because more of anything makes it less expensive.
Sure, but lowering the cost of childcare was not what you said the issue was. The issue is capacity and having more childcare facilities. You said the majority of the childcare facilities we needed more, that they were at capacity. And so unless you're saying that our funding is going to allow them to add 5 more children to their capacity, then I think we're trying to solve a different problem. And, you know, I want us to be really careful that we're not funding a particular sector in our society when there are plenty of other businesses that would love to lower their product cost, or, you know, that's business. That's how business operates. I don't have to tell you guys that. So I feel like we're walking a fine line here, and I can tell you with the information you provided me tonight, I don't support this is as it's presented. I would love to hear some more information, just because we need to be fair and equitable to how we're supporting our businesses. We have small business growth retention funds for our entrepreneurials for small businesses. They could work under that same type of program. So there's got to be a reason and why we're doing something specifically like a forgivable loan for that particular sector. And so what you just said doesn't line up with what you said earlier. So I have some issues with that. And the Imagine fund that we did last year was due to COVID. We were telling businesses, you're facing the pandemic, you've had to shut your doors, you're being forced to rethink how you do your businesses, whether that's how you deliver food, what containers you're putting food in, whatever. I mean, that was the issue then, and that's why that program was set up and that was worked. So I don't see what we're trying to do now is the same as that. So anyway, I just wanted to express my concerns about that. I need more information. I just want to let you know, I really don't support this, and and it's not that I don't want more childcare. I just think we need to have really good reasons of why we're offering one particular business a forgivable loan and we're offering another business a loan that they have to repay that has different constraints on it. So I need some real hard numbers in order for me to justify that. And we can tackle it later. I just wanted to let you know we can circle back on it. For the flex space item that Commissioner O'Donnell and you all talked about, is this a zoning issue? Is it that we're lacking land, or is it that our zoning codes don't allow for flex space opportunities?
We're lacking space.
Okay. So back to the land issue. We don't have big enough land.
Right. And also, we don't have, when a manufacturer or whomever decides to relocate to a location, to a city, they're looking for ample land. And if you have an existing building, that's also a plus. We don't have either. And they're not going to wait until we get our act together to get it, because they have a tight turnaround. And so we're in competition with other communities that have that. And so I'm advocating that we work to get that. Now, we have urban growth. I guess you call it urban, what is it? Urban growth areas.
The reserves?
Boundary?
The boundary and the reserves.
Mm-hmm. And annexation into some of those areas, I understand it's a challenge, but that's the way to grow. You can't grow land, obviously, but that's the way to acquire land for those kind of purposes. Oregon City needs an industrial park.
Yeah, but I don't know that you're going to get support for an industrial park on the outskirts or on the where the boundary is at. I think on the urban fringe, I don't think you'll get support for that, probably by nobody at this dais and very few in the community. So, there may be some cases in this that, if we don't have it, we don't have it. I mean, I've seen the development that Canby has done with their light industrial. They had land clearly available zoning. It's worked great for them, and maybe this is just one area that won't work for us given our constraints, but I want to be realistic. If an industrial park on the edge of our UGB, or because that's where the land is the goal, I think we should have a discussion about that, because I don't think it's generally going to be supported. I don't know anybody who wants to expand our UGB, and expanding on the edge of urban fringe is probably not going to happen.
But as you know, Mayor, just like any plan, you have to call it out. And you have to call out our strengths as well as our shortcomings, so at least it's documented, so that when you don't get that, you know why you didn't get it.
I wouldn't label that as an opportunity, I guess. You may find it in some other area on that chart, but probably not opportunity. I guess, and last thing I'll say, we can follow up offline. I need more information on the city purchasing of property. That bullet item that it was in your presentation, I'm not sure why we would do that, so I'm interested in hearing that conversation. Again, due to time, I think we should move on.
Leverage.
I don't know why. Why would we become a land owning, expanding our land ownership? I can think of things for dog parks, or parks is generally the conversation that we have. But anyway, I need more information. And then lastly, I agree with Commissioner Smith about marketing and timeliness. We have a lot of businesses that are currently struggling with their workforce. I go to some restaurants and I show up and they're surprisingly closed on a Saturday night because they didn't have staff. And so I agree. I think we need to be really thoughtful about how much marketing we push. There's with the COVID stuff, and until we get staffing, and let's check on these markets. I mean, I understand we wanted to push a lot of this stuff, but we need to be thoughtful too. And I feel like we'd be wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars if our industries that we're pushing people to aren't quite ready. Because I agree, we show up now and there's no capacity. There's signs on the doors. They don't have food. They don't have whatever. So
That would be the worst thing that could happen, because you would bear that onus for years afterward.
yeah, and then the money's lost. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the reputation. We went there. They didn't deliver. They had no goods to deliver.
Yeah.
All right. If we can keep it brief.
Right, he has got one and I've got one.
Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in response, because I too have some concerns about at least the appearance of looking like we're giving a handout to one sector over the other. But I also think it's important to note that downstream, it's not just going to help the childcare providers. And you were just talking about the employer shortage. And I think addressing I know that addressing the childcare issue is going to at least address partially that employee shortage. Because we know from watching everything with the pandemic, especially affecting women, and half of our workforce feeling like they can't re-enter employment space because they are stuck at home with children. So I just want to make it clear that I also have concerns about that, but I think it's important to note that it goes beyond just supporting one sector, and that it does flow into the rest of those, which are issues that we've all been talking about pretty frequently tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I would concur with that. I really don't have a problem. If this is something that we've identified as a sector that needs assistance because it has broader economic benefits, then there's nothing wrong with that. My experience in my former employment, this was something that's very typical. City and the Urban Renewal Agency routinely purchase properties as leverage. Maybe they, the private sector couldn't quite get it done, but the local government can come in and purchase something, but they didn't keep it. They spun it off for an economic development benefit. But a couple of things I found my notes that I had on the flex space thing. So I understand that particular niche, and I know that the city of Tualatin has done very well in that regard. As a matter of fact, I got to work for them for a while. But one of the things I was thinking of too the other day when I was over at the Red Soils development that we bought, spun off, and then there are buildings there. Are any of those buildings, do they have the possibility, and do we know whether some of those can be redeveloped internally? I mean, we've got space, but is it being adequately used? And to me, adaptive reuse applies to those types of buildings as well as other buildings that we've looked at in our community. The other thing that you and I have talked about is that given the changing nature of the workforce, do we really need large tracts of land that are sprawling with big, gigantic, herking buildings when we really need to be going up in order to utilize the land more equitably and more sustainably? So, you know, are we looking at, you know, always horizontal development, or are we looking at possibly some vertical development, which could help us? And then I guess the other thing I've made a note here, what niche are we trying to identify? Because every community in the Portland metro area is all looking, you know, they're all looking for the 50,000 square feet. They're looking for this business. What is the niche that this plan is identifying that we're going to go after? What is it that we have here that nobody else has, like our history, that we can use as our hook to say, you should come put your business in Oregon City? Because as you and I know, nobody's going to get the intels. That's just not realistic. But maybe there is a smaller spin-off or some other type of industry that might be particularly attractive for our area. And I didn't see that in the document. Maybe it's in the bigger document, but we've got a niche, we've got a hook somewhere. What is that in terms of economic development that we can offer that nobody else really can offer? And that's what we need to go after, instead of it just being, you know, fairly generic and, you know, whoever's out there. So I think that's something we should look at, possibly trying to identify. And you probably already have all the documentation to, you know, hone that down and say, okay, it's these 3 industries that we're going to key in on. So that was the last of my comments, but thank you.
All right. I think you've gotten a lot of information. We've received a lot of information there. I agree. There's a lot of stuff here. So thanks. And I'm sure we'll all be following up with you and you'll be following up with us. Thanks, Mr. Graham.
Thank you.
Ms. Griffin.
In your packet on what packet pages 158, 159 was the detailed breakdown of the economic development budget. I think there was questions concerning what was in there, what those line items were. So if you have questions on that, please reach out.
Okay. Reach out to you or Mr. Graham or both? It's probably both.
Both would be preferred.
Yeah, yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item on the agenda, do we want to take a 5-minute break?
I would love a 5-minute break.
Yes. We were all waiting for that.
Well, a couple of people have already taken the break, so.
They got up with the not the exciting part, so I'm going to stay for the exciting.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, good evening. I am calling this Oregon City work session back to order after a short break. So our next item on the agenda is Oregon City Sidewalk Replacement Assistance Program. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. And Jacob, if you could pull up that PowerPoint first, that would be my preference, not the red line.
And you're going to have to speak right in that microphone because you are very hard to hear, Mr. Lewis.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so
Get on it.
So yeah, we're here to talk about a topic that you're very familiar with. It's been in front of you a few times. I would just say that the intention was to take what you shared with us last time and work that feedback into it, as well as some rework of the kind of the contribution piece a little bit, and bring that back to you as well. So as I was kind of going through the commission report, there is an unfortunate situation, which is that you never got the red line, from what I can tell. It's named red line. It was a red line. I don't know how that works, but I don't know if it's Granicus or if it was me, but you didn't get the red line.
Okay.
Okay, so just know that. You got two copies that are pretty similar. One of them has some language that was struck through, and really the only reason that showed up was because I actually struck through it, but it was a red line from the previous time, so if I would to delete it, it wouldn't show up in the red line.
I just assumed that was the only thing I was like, is that
No,
it?
and
Okay.
so I didn't catch that until just looking at my printed version and realizing, where's my red line? And so we have that red line, and I went through it, well, I was trying to listen to James too, but while I was listening to James, I was trying to highlight as many of the major topics as I could, so we can pull that up and go through that, if that would be better for you, but
Yeah, I think so.
I was pretty disappointed because that would have been much more helpful for you. So,
Yeah, that's usually what I look at, so that would probably be pretty helpful, just to
Okay.
step through it.
let's go through this first.
Mayor Wildsmith, is he
and then,
talking about the
we'll come
test
back.
overview document? Well, the one I have has red lines in it.
Well, are they?
Well, then you magically got the only version that has red lines somehow, so.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that would happen. There's just one, in the
only one
version that you have, it's really only got a small section that's been struck through.
Right, that's what I have.
That's not,
No,
that's
that's
not
He's
the
saying
red
that's
line.
not it.
Oh, that's not it,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
because that's the one I pulled up, so.
So, pretty
Okay.
straightforward topic, except for, I really messed that up. So I apologize for that. We've been through this slide before, this is just kind of for the listening audience. It's a citywide problem. Roots from trees, street trees, are competing with sidewalks, and the sidewalks are losing and the street trees are winning. And they're in that process, they are buckling sidewalks, creating trip hazards, all those kind of things. So I will tell you that the staff who are normally dealing with this issue are pretty excited about this program. I had just, I think when I started this, I was like, oh my, we're going to be spending way more money than I really would like to spend on this program. But in talking to staff about it, and as we continue to collaborate on this topic, they're really looking forward to it because they struggle with those permits and trying to work with property owners that are trying to fix their sidewalks, but not feeling like they're getting much support from the city. So again, you know the problem. So the goal for this is just continue to stay what it is, which is to address sidewalk panels lifted by the street trees and prevent the associated sidewalk trip hazards. So we're really trying to improve our pedways, the existing pedestrian ways. It's a citywide problem and a citywide program. It is a test program. We did talk about a $200,000 placeholder for this program, and I haven't suggested anything different than that in the red line that I've provided. That seemed to resonate well with you folks, and I think staff is in some agreement on that too. And I'll have some information that you can see that you can look at some of the past permitting on sidewalks to get us into that. Again, we mentioned this is an annual program. So applicants can apply. What we've really done in the red line is to make sure that we get applicants to come in once a year. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they may have to go through, especially those that have many sidewalk issues, and deal with them all at once. They may have, a sidewalk issue that's progressing, but not as bad. So, but they could still only apply once per year. And we talked about priorities in the last go around. I think I missed this in this slide, but we really kind of eliminated all that prioritization stuff that I think Mayor Lyle Smith, you raised it as why would we go through all that prioritization when it's really about applicant coming before us and trying to get their assistance that they need, and how would we know, and how would we prioritize that? Because we're not necessarily going to hold those. We're going to take them as they come in. So less prioritization in this red line version. It is an assistance program, so again, that property owner is still obligated to maintain their sidewalk and be responsible for that. If there was a trip there, that they're still responsible for that. In the municipal code, we're not proposing to change municipal code. We're keeping that language in place. We're just establishing this program. And it is a grant. It's a reimbursement program. That was we had some discussion about that before, about, well, how do we, this is too much for a property owner. I think we heard some of that from Mr. Guile, which is, we've got all this sidewalk liability. Why do we have to pay for it first and then get reimbursed? The way we worked on that with our finance department was doing the best job we could to turn that around really quickly and make sure that they get it within 5 business days. And even for some property owners that really are having a hardship, could we turn that around even quicker? And so kind of know it's in the queue, have that check ready and kind of waiting for them. And what I heard from Matt and others was that, hey, yeah, we can do that on more of a limited basis, but we'd like that 5-day window. So that's how we're dealing with that. If you remember in the pricing schedule before, it was a little confusing. My staff were kind of confused by it as well. So just know that was some of my work. I like to keep people guessing all the time. So just had, as we talked through that, we said, let's keep this simple. Let's look at a price per panel. So if someone comes in and they need to do a panel, whether it's a 4x4 panel or a 6x6 panel, but just somewhere I listed the 6x6 because it's the larger one. Let's pay them a price per panel. And we landed on what we shared with you before was $1,200 for 2 panels. And so we just brought that back to $600 per panel. That would be for removal of the panel itself, any roots associated with that. I mean, I think that's at $600 per panel. Depending on how many they have to do, it gets more cost effective, obviously, the more that they have to do. But just trying to have, rather than a pricing schedule that people don't necessarily understand, one and done, one price per panel, whether you're doing it as a group, because we did talk a little bit about there's some benefits to doing it as a group. And what I heard from the commission was, well, yeah, but there's still a lot of work in coordinating that group. So we just said one and done, $600 a pop. The other piece that we clarified in this one was only the applicant who pays for the work is eligible. So if the sidewalks were repaired in 2018, but the house is since sold, the new owner wouldn't qualify for the grant. Only if the property owner that owned the house at the time applied for, they're the only ones eligible to apply for the grant. And then we also had a work timeliness. I had 120 days. We still listed that 120 days as what we would like to see that done with a 30-day extension, so 150 days. There would be provisions if they needed more than 150 days to do that. We'd rather, it seems like a really long time, but it's also a challenge to get folks there. What we said was, if in the red line version, we said if it's over 150 days, you would receive a 50% grant, not 100% grant, or not, you'd get $300 per panel, not $600 per panel.
I guess we're very basic, probably, I don't know. restate that after I turned on my mic. I'm not aware of many 6x6 panels. I mean, most of the developments I walk through, I don't know, maybe they're 4x5 or, and should we phrase it up to $600 or you didn't want any variable schedule? Is that your goal?
It was to try to get out from under trying to verify every single bid, try to keep it simple for the property owner. If you remember, we had some language in there about trying to get bids. We didn't think that that was appropriate, especially given the bidding environment. And so this is more about verifying that the panels are lifted first, verifying that the panels are replaced properly, and then, authorizing the work for that. So one of the things that we did in preparation for this was, because this look-back provision was problematic a little bit, and it still may not quite be what the commission wants, but I just want to express why we did what we did. So we looked from July 2018 was when the city purchased the new permit system. And that InterGov permit system, while it's got back information on it, the information that's most clear to us is from July 2018 on. So we looked through December, the last week. So we looked through the permits last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago now. And we took every single permit that we could find in that permit system that was associated with sidewalk repair. And we sent staff out to look at all those sidewalk repairs and just verify and document how many panels, because we don't always document carefully how many panels are replaced in the permit system. So we went out and re-verified that. We also re-verified through both the existing trees that are there today or through the Google Earth or through OC Map. They looked to find out if there was trees there at the time of the permit. And through that system, they verified out of all the permits that we had at that time, there was really 381 panels. So we did that by year in an effort to try to come up with a value. If we use that $600 figure and and we open it up for folks to come back in to get their look back reimbursement, this is kind of the schedule. So at $600 per panel, that reimbursement would total up to $228,000. So we do have, if we're in agreement that we look back through only those years, that's one piece. And then if we look at that $600 number, we've still got this problem, which is, we're proposing a $200,000 program, and we could have people come in the door with a request more than what we have in the program, and that doesn't fund the new ones moving forward. So we've talked internally about how we market that program, and do we do it, by year and say, we're going to start the program for everybody that's moving forward and offer the grant for folks that are in 2018 and start somehow like that, just to see how close we get to that $200,000 number, because I have a feeling we're going to get close to that. And we can always come back to the commission if that happens, but I guess I'm still kind of wanting to see how it goes.
Are you saying, Mr. Lewis, that these folks would not need to have a receipt or anything, that they can just say, hey, I applied for a permit and it's in the permit system, and therefore you can verify that? Right. We've got
good documentation on these. Okay. They've got a permit, they got it approved and inspected. And now I know there's more than these, right? I think a lot of people do their sidewalks without a permit, but I think we agreed that or the direction we got was that, no, they would qualify if they pulled a permit to do the work. So that's what we looked at. And we have no other way of kind of looking beyond that, to be honest with you. So that's what we like about using the InterGov system. It doesn't go back to forever, but it goes back quite a ways. It's still a pretty big liability, and that's kind of what we're proposing. And we can jump into the red line version. This is the last slide I really had for you, other than a question slide. So if you want to jump to the red line, I asked Jacob if he could pull it up. Problem is kind of hard to read. And I'm not sure if it makes, obviously to adopt this, we have to bring it back to you anyway. So, my preference would be you to had a chance to review this, because I really wanted to get to the finish line on this one tonight. But we can go through the red line, and I've highlighted the things. So it's a red line, but I call it the green line because I just tried to highlight this stuff real quickly here in green. That's kind of the bigger ticket items. A lot of the other red line comments you have seen. So if you scroll down to that first block of green text, I can talk through that a little bit. And again, I apologize for that confusion. But this first paragraph really talks about that work that we did just recently to look at, we went through 209 right-of-way permit records on file. Of the 209, 147 are recorded with a work class of sidewalk. Each location was field verified and established as including 530 concrete panel replacements, of which 381 were panels damaged by tree roots. There's a lot that were just replaced for other reasons, or particularly ice damage. So there was a fair amount of that too, which wouldn't qualify for the program. So 381 panels damaged by tree roots. So the recent site visit and inventory was completed on November 16th through 19th. Field visits were supplemented with a review of aerial photos to better determine the tree-related damages. I was struggling to figure out if I got all these highlighted, but there's, I think there's small changes but in 4, 5, and 6, but the grant funds are only eligible for applicants who own the home or applied for the grant at the time of the replacement and can provide proof the permit work was completed under their ownership. So there is that proof piece that we would want to make sure we could validate, most of which we can do, right? We can do through the information we have in our mapping system to figure out whether or not the property is sold or not in the last, since 2018. This section talks about that time extension beyond 150 days may be approved on a limited basis by the Public Works Director, conditioned upon monthly update. So I'd really like to, a lot of people, if they know they've got 120 days or 150 days, it doesn't get done for, 149. So it'd be nice to know that they're communicating with us and giving those kind of updates on how that work is proceeding. And we could do an extension beyond that if that's the case, but with a reduced grant of up to 50%. I want to say most all of this has been in here. We eliminated based on, the concern that it was going to be too difficult. The contractor's license, we did say include verification that the work is performed by an Oregon licensed contractor is also maintaining a current Oregon City Metro business license. And then this next big section is, I think, Marilyn Smith, you kind of said, why are we going through this prioritization effort? Because we're going to take them in one at a time and prove them one at a time. So why do you, and I think we were in agreement with that. So that all got eliminated. And then we really moved down to the grant rates and eliminated all this single application or group application and trying to, identify 3 or more, 4 or more, just clean that up and eliminate the maximums based on what we're seeing in terms of the inventory that we did. There are a couple of properties that had several panels that were replaced and due to tree roots. And so they could get up to a maximum amount. And I forget what that was, but I think it was around $15,000 was the maximum that we saw if they came to us and wanted to get a reimbursement. But we really just kind of streamlined this to be, and I didn't highlight it, but it's that last red line statement, sidewalk panel unit removal and replacement rate, 600 per panel. And you're right, what we said was it wasn't just residential sidewalk. I think the commission said, no, we want this to apply, it could apply in the business community. And we do have bearings with sidewalks. So I was just trying to put a quantity around it, not make it too big and not make it too small. So if we came to a scenario where somebody wanted, to do, or felt like they had to do their frontage sidewalk on Main Street, for instance, around the tree wells, then we'd look at their sidewalks and probably apply something like that 6x6 area as part of their replacement per, they did, a couple hundred feet. We'd use that we'd use 36 square feet as kind of the panel divider.
What's the tree removal component of this, or is there one?
There is no tree removal component at this point in time. So again, remember, I'm trying to bifurcate the trees from the sidewalk.
Okay.
We need to come back with a tree program. And then
What was our position on permits? Are we going to charge for permits?
we would charge for permits.
What is that amount?
That's a great question. Let me look it up, or maybe Tony can look it up for me. I think there's a component of the permit and then the inspection, and I want to say it gets to around $150. But that would be it. Again, a group permit could do it under one, and you could do several panels for that one permit cost, or you could choose, I want to do just mine, that one panel, and pay the same permit fee.
I could do one tree or a neighborhood worth of trees for the permit?
If the neighborhood so that would be one way to acknowledge those group permits, because they could get the same. The main thing there is trying to keep the inspection time focused on, getting all your forms inspected at once. And then under procedures, there was an acknowledgement that we needed to make a set of procedures for the look back, and then something similar but different for the sidewalk work required yet to be completed. So anybody moving forward. And so I've made those adjustments to better reflect what we really intend there. So, this second one, sidewalk work required and yet to be completed, which is, Jacob, right? Right, yeah, it's kind of that last green line right there. But if you look at the step one, first we want you to look at, our program and better and fully understand that. And then before work begins, we want you to submit your application and then get your permit application approved and pay the fee.
Does that web page exist or yet to be constructed?
Yet to be constructed. Okay. What I meant to, and I didn't notice it, but we do have kind of the application form, a draft of that, and I hope that's in there. No, I don't see that. But yeah, we've created a form that it's a fillable PDF. People can turn it in online or.
And that form needs to have the bid attached to it?
We recommend it. We'd like to get it, but mostly for our own records to just kind of say, was that $600 on the mark or is it far off the mark? So it's not necessarily, because people could do, this allows for folks to do the work in, if you own a piece of property and you want to demo and do the sidewalk work, you have that ability to still do that work. So,
John,
yeah,
I think you need to have some sort of documentation. It's a CYA thing for the city. I think we need to get something. And I appreciate the fact that you have license and people that are qualified, because we know what happened during the trees, that there were people running through the city saying, oh, I'll take these trees down for you. And, they driving by in a truck with a chainsaw. Who were they? And if something happened?
I think the concern, and again, I remember this being a commission concern, was that there was a concern that it was too much work for the property owner to have to do all these things when they don't know how to do that kind of work. And, you know, I just saw, I was trying to streamline it based on what I thought was what I was hearing from the commission. But if we want to put that language back in, I'm happy to do that. I just don't want to be in a scenario where we're over scrutinizing those either, right? I think if we set a rate at $600 a unit, we can look at that over time. We do have a 1-year test program. We could say, well, and you're right, if we've got pricing information from property owners during that year, we could say, well, it really isn't a $600 fix, it's a $400 fix, or it's a $800 fix. So. We did look at an estimate of that, but we're not including it in this package, so.
Okay, but you know, again, so I'm using myself as an example, so I'm applying for this program. I have to take the tree out.
Yep.
So that is going to be my cost?
Yes, until we get a tree removal and replacement program in place, you would.
Okay, so then I take my tree out for whatever it costs, and then I do my demo of my panel, and then I put the panel back in. Essentially, I mean, that's, well, what I did was tree removal, panel, tree put back in, panel replaced.
Are we mandating it? What if there's a giant root underneath the panel? The person cuts that out and clears it so they can pour a flat panel, and then the tree dies. And
yeah, I know that's a problem, but you know, one of the things in the letter, which I'm assuming Mr. Mr. Lewis is going to address later, is that 99.9% of these are tree issues.
All of these, excuse me. 100% of these.
Okay, 100% are tree issues. So the tree, all we are doing right now, and I'm just saying it, I know that what we're doing, but I just want to say this for the record, all we are doing right now is we are making available funding for replacing the concrete panel of the sidewalk, and the tree is whoever the owner is, that's their responsibility to take the tree out. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And so to return to the previous conversation, are you saying, Mr. Lewis, that someone could replace their own sidewalk panel and then ask, like, they go and buy bags of concrete and they say they're handy with tools and could they do it themselves? Is there a DIY component to this and they can get $600 reimbursed or no?
It would have to meet our standards, but yes.
If it met your standards, yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's got to meet our standards. So we're still permit, still inspection, still confirmation. Bagged concrete is typically not what we would expect to see because it's harder to get the right mix design for that and know for sure what the strength of that is. So they'd probably still have to bring in a concrete truck, but yeah, they could do it themselves.
having taken a concrete course, I was wondering how specific you were going to be on that.
We're just saying meet our standards, and our standards are pretty clear about strength of concrete, and you typically have to have a mixed design that comes with the truck that says, here's how strong your concrete is. So, yeah, I mean, practically somebody could do it with some know-how that owns their home, but probably most are going to hire somebody to do it.
Yeah, I'm just tying back to that paperwork conversation of like, what are we requiring?
We're trying to, I mean, again, trying to keep it relatively simple so that if, if they're getting bids, why not share them? I agree with that, right? Why not share that with them? This language encourages that they share them with them. It doesn't make it a permit requirement, but they encourage it.
If you want, curious if you're going to say 3,000 PSI concrete free of cold seams or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, we're going to have to, I think our inspectors are going to have to, if people are self-performing, we're going to have to coach them and do those kind of things. We do that anyway, so that's not a new thing. I guess, so there was some other things that, Tom Guile raised that I wanted to talk through, and that was the inspections near water service lines. So I can't speak to what happened back in the the 90s when those developments were built. But what I can tell you is it's been mixed in how we review the street frontage improvements. Typically, a development goes in and they build their curbs, and they don't build the sidewalks until after the home is built. So they put the curbs in. Now, even they put in stormwater facilities, because I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of concrete structure associated with those stormwater facilities. Sometimes they'll put in the ADA ramps at the corners, and then they'll walk away from it, or they'll take it to the next phase where another team comes in and starts building the homes. They get the building permits, and they build the home. And at the completion of the home, before they can get their final certificate of occupancy, they have to both put in the sidewalk and put in the trees. Normally what happens is they can get their certificate of occupancy when they get the sidewalk done, not necessarily when they put in the trees. They still have time to put in the trees, and what we've allowed them to do is, say, for a subdivision, this has been between both, typically Public Works handles the sidewalks, planning handles the trees. That seems like a little bit of a broken model as we kind of continue to look at that. But I think what's happened is, for one, the sidewalk inspection happens. They build that sidewalk, and there's an empty, basically a planter strip there waiting for whatever's going to be in there. At that point in time, there's, everything's in. The hydrants are in, the street lights are in, the water services are in. And then the developer, and more often than not, comes in with 15 or whatever number of trees that they need, and their landscaper plants those trees. And that could be done without an inspection, because we really don't have an inspection for that. What we look for is, did they put in the right type of trees, and how, did they put in enough of them? And I think that that's been a problem. And so we're requiring it as part of the Public Works inspection to look at those trees. But back in the 90s, I'm certain that it was not a point of strong study. There may have been some that have been better than others. How close did they look at they were to the, now we're looking for sight distance. We're looking at proximity to a street light. We're looking at proximity to a water line. We're looking at other things. So as far as Tom's question goes, is they may have been inspected. Did they look for that particular element? Obviously not. I would say this about the tree root that we saw excavated from those pictures. I don't know if you remember that. There was one picture where it was like 18-foot long wood rod. It wouldn't have mattered that, in that subdivision. It's even worse now when we look at the narrow lots. There's usually a drive aisle, and maybe a little bit of a planter strip. It's, we're really trying to squeeze a lot of things into that narrow lot size. So it's getting more and more difficult. But in this case, in that subdivision there, most of those tree roots look like they're moving down, pretty much down the entire planter strip. So, and I want to say, we talked about this afterwards, and I don't recall the answer, but that particular neighborhood gets their water from Clackamas River Water District. So Tom mentioned a notice. I wasn't aware of a notice, and I haven't seen a notice, but if they heard that, my sense is they probably heard it from a Clackamas River Water employee that was kind of recognizing that your water service is in that root wad somewhere down there, and it probably is going to become a problem for you as you try to remove that root wad. So that's one. Same thing with the inspection of trees around streetlights. I would, nothing worse than having good street lighting until the tree matures, and then it engulfs the street light. So we look for that now, but back then, how closely they looked at that, I don't. There's examples that they obviously didn't look at it close enough. And then I think the other comment I heard from Tom was this expectation to pay ahead of time for the work. And again, we kind of talked about that. It's felt a little risky in that, you're putting money out and maybe the work happens properly and maybe it doesn't. And then, does the contractor get paid and walk away? It just puts us in a really bad spot. So our objective was to try to get that, if we need to work with a property owner that, maybe doesn't have the credit to keep it on credit long enough for a 5 business days so we can issue a check, then we'll find out what their circumstances are and we can, get that check pre-approved and still give finance a few days of time to cut that check and have it available as soon as we can confirm that the sidewalk has been repaired properly. So that's how we approach that. I think that's all I have. And I really apologize for the red lines, but we can ship those out. If what you're hearing from me seems right, happy to take comments via email and incorporate it into the final version and make sure you get the final version in that packet.
So I have I think two small questions. One, what's your plan as far as the look back to 2018? I know we've talked about that quite a bit, but were you saying that there's a plan to reach out to those people who got permits and notify them of this program? Is that what the plan is, or?
Right, that's
yes.
what we would, that was the plan. Notification, it's really kind of a question of start with 2018, start with the program for people moving forward and see how far we get. There wasn't that many permits in the second half of 2018. And then whether it be annually, we work through those 4 years and try to balance that with any work moving forward. That's how we were planning to do it.
Yeah, I guess my challenge is like when I first thought about this look back program, I wasn't thinking that we were going to have a system that had a list of names and addresses and phone numbers, and we were going to do all this outreach to those folks. It was more that we were setting up a program. We could do general notices, set up the program, if people asked about it, or put some notices in Trail News. And then if they had receipts or something, then they could ask for reimbursement. That's kind of, so I feel like we have 2 different programs now. And it's not that I mind your program. I think the program that you've designed is definitely more thorough and streamlined. The challenge now, though, is that the $200,000 isn't gonna cover folks who are dealing with issues now. If, say, everybody that gets notified of this and says, oh, well, you just got a system that you're telling me I can now get a $600 check or a $1,200 check and I don't have to do anything. And so I think there's a mismatch there from what, for me personally, what the original intent was of the program, of the look back program that we set up versus how it's going to work right now. And so I'm not sure what the resolution is. I don't necessarily feel like we want to come up with another $200,000 to supplement or try to come up with more money. I don't know. I just kind of open that to the floor, to the commission. Maybe I'm not sure what the resolution is. It didn't really.
I'm trying to be as fair about it as what I heard some pretty strong things about the look back from the commission last time about wanting to, make it right. So I'm trying to do that in an organized way. And by doing that, you could question, the year, but we do have some problems with verification at that point in time. If we just kind of open it up and ask people to bring receipts, I don't know.
Yeah, we won't get very many. That's why I figured, I was like, well, we probably won't get very many people who have saved receipts from further than a couple of years, and therefore the $200,000 is sufficient. I guess what I'm saying is you've done a great job of lining up a program that's super thorough and is going to do the best job is that we can as far as looking back and having a system that verifies it. Now the problem is you've done such a great job, I don't think we have enough money for what we've talked about doing, because we have people who now will need to take care of trees. And if we have a surge of people who are asking for their reimbursements, I'm just afraid that, I don't know, maybe in a perfect world it'll all work out. But
I think John was proposing to take 1 year at a time. So it would take us 4 years so we'd start with 2018 looks like we've got a liability of about 36,000, leaving 164,000 for new projects. Then the next year we would target the 2019, which has around 74,000. So we would try to avoid, we've
Using
got
all
more liabilities than
yeah.
we've identified right now for year one,
Yeah,
potentially.
that's how we've talked about doing it.
And then I guess my other question was, so if someone has multiple trees and they only have one opportunity to ask for grant funds per year, is our recommendation then, in order to avoid code enforcement issues, they would need to do all of their trees all at one time? Otherwise, they risk code enforcement coming out and citing them for the other two trees on their property when they've only taken care of one.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that they do it all at once, but then there's that question of,
There's a cost issue.
Cost issue, is there
Yeah.
a cost issue there? And again, we would probably work with them on that, but in this neighborhood, the Trailview neighborhood, I think I remember one property owner that, can't remember if they had 2 or 3 sides. I mean, they had probably 8 trees that were probably going to have to come out, as well as all the sidewalk associated with that. So
You're talking about corner lots?
corner
Corner
lots.
lots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get that. The right way to do that would be all at once. And, it's just, there's that financial obligation, but, I hate to assume anything about people's ability to do that, because some people are pretty stretched, but it
Right.
seems like,
Okay, I was just making sure I understood what the recommendation is. It's not really a good situation. I don't know that I have a good solution for it at the moment, but. All right, any other comments, questions for Mr. Lewis? Commissioner Smith?
So we're only going back to 2018.
For reimbursement.
that's what we proposed for the look back.
I have a problem with that. So I don't know how much I'll go into it. I've talked about this plenty, and so I don't feel like I need to go into it more. But I feel like we are opening up a huge can of worms, huge. And I do think this fixes some of the problems, but it doesn't deal with the problem that we have had for the last 15 years. And so we've had a lot of people over the last 15 years who have paid for their entire replacements themselves, some who have paid with no help at all from the city, some that have gotten some help from the city in different scenarios over all this time. And we're going to fix some of these problems, but it's been inconsistent because we never fixed this problem in 2008 that we should have fixed then in multiple neighborhoods. And so I'm against this completely, because I think no matter, I'd love to fix some of the problems, but I think this is gonna come back to us in 5 years, in 2 years, or 1 year, and again and again and again, because we did not fix this 10 years ago, and we knew it was a problem, and we didn't deal with it. And I think it's interesting. We write on our own website right now, and what I'm trying to deal with the issue that I think has not been dealt with here, which is an inconsistency. There's 2 different things. If people if developers plant a tree in front of a house, and it's on our list of trees, and 30 years from there, it grows too big and it cracks the sidewalk, that's going to happen. That's not really the problem that has gotten us here. The problem that has gotten us here is, at least in 3 occasions, maybe even more, that I've been on the commission, the developers planted the exact tree that we told them, and then it lifted the sidewalk. That is a completely different scenario. And now, if that tree stayed on the list, but no, we deliberately took the street trees off of the list, knowing that it was that problem. And then if you look at our website right now, it doesn't even acknowledge that. This is what it says. And it's really interesting how this kind of relates to the public, because it basically says you have to rely on that street tree list. Well, they did. these developers did. Right tree, right place. It is critically important that a tree species chosen is appropriate for the planning area. The city has adopted a recommendation list of street trees, which is organized according to the width of the planter strip. This avoids unnecessary damage to infrastructure and prolongs the life of the tree. In certain subdivisions, which were approved in the 1980s and 1990s, street trees were planted that have outgrown or started outgrowing the fairly narrow planter strip, which were typical of that period. In these cases, the city strongly recommends that they are replanted with trees that are appropriate to the contained area, basically using the tree list. And that it's recommended that the property owner replace them. It doesn't say anything here. That's pretty much what happened. They did use that list in the 1980s and 90s and beyond that, and the list was wrong. And that's our fault. That's the city's fault. So, I think this is opening the door for a lot of problems because there were a lot of people that just fixed it. There were a lot of people probably that never fixed it from those subdivisions, and their sidewalks are still cracked. But they predate 2018, and now we're going to fix it for one neighborhood, and guess what's going to happen? It's a mess. And so I'm not going to support this in any fashion until we really fix it. And it may cost us a lot of money, or we don't fix it at all, and we just wait for them somebody to come to us and make us fix it. Because I think that's where we're at. We can't support it.
If we went to the proof model, Commissioner Smith, where we asked the property owner to produce the receipts and maybe a permit, copy of the permit, would that would kind of address Mayor Lyle Smith's concern, which is rather than open it up, if we just have the program published in our trail news that says, in order to qualify for a look back, you need to bring in a copy of your permit and your copy of your receipt, because just receipts don't work because they probably didn't get a permit to do the work.
But you're still only talking 2018.
No, I'm saying open it up back.
You're saying open it up.
Open it
further.
up. And I don't know what that liability looks like. It could be pretty huge, but if what I'm hearing from others is not too many people keep that documentation, then maybe it's a short list. I don't know. That may be a better approach. I'm not, part of me was wanting to have some predictability about this. That's why we looked so hard at these permits that we have, strong records of. But if that is something that the commission would support, I have a feeling that you're probably right. We're probably not going to see those from too many.
No, but if we go that route, it at least provides a program that says we acknowledge that the city had trees on the street tree list that shouldn't have been done, and if you've replaced those because of that error, and you can show that, then we're willing to provide you some reimbursement. I think it would take a lot, takes paperwork and, I don't know, but yeah. Any other thoughts?
I really feel that if people have done work prior and we go farther back with a look back, it is only reasonable and fair to require them to have documentation. I like to trust, but then I like to verify. I don't think that it's prudent for the city to say, well, we'll just take your word for it. I think, I don't know about most homeowners, but I have receipts going back to for stuff I've done in my house. You never know.
Yeah, I do too. So it sounds like you're in favor of not putting the 2018.
I can go either way as long as there is documentation. I mean, I feel very strongly about that. I just think we have to do that. I think it's the city's being prudent, homeowners being prudent, that sort of thing.
Tomorrow, do you have anything?
I would agree with Commissioner McGriff, and I also just have a quick clarifying question. So you can only apply once a year, and for each 6x6 panel, it is $600, but there is no limit to how many panels for which you put in that application?
As long as, yeah, it's verifiable that it's tree related, yeah.
Right, okay.
So we're not replacing driveways, we're not, it's
Right.
it's really pretty limited.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I think about the range of options this presents, right? And you can stay with the firm position that, hey, in the books, it says the homeowner's responsible, end of story. That's one end of the position. The other position is, and that could end up in a possible lawsuit, and that may or may not be, but the law is what it is. That's what it says. I think it's in this, we're trying to do the right thing. I think there's some expectation by homeowners that the city's going to bear the total cost of everything. That's not what the program says. The program says assistance, not coverage, not total coverage. We're trying to help. We're not going to bear everything. So yeah, it comes down to removal of the tree. Part of me feels that there is a responsibility of the homeowner to act in a timely manner. You see a problem developing, you make a call and you address it. So I'm not totally sympathetic to that it should be the city that pays everything. I do feel we should open it up. I don't like the wording that it's 600 per panel. I think it can be up to 600 per panel or invoice, whichever is less. There's going to be people that are going, because there's people that are going to create invoices. And I like the fact of the permit. I think it needs to be permitted. I think it needs to be up to $600 or invoice, whichever is less. I don't want to cap it either. I don't want to, as far as time period. I'm willing to roll the dice, but in the end, it is a test program. You could expend these funds in record time and we're out. And our effort to try to do something right. So that's where it stands with me.
All right, so I guess, do you feel like you have enough information to make some edits? I think we're going to have to take another shot at this. I'm not sure if we're going to be successful.
You
think you could do it as a general business item?
right, did you want us to bring it back in a work session or bring it back on the agenda? I think we understand that we're going to open this up based on a receipt and permit verification process. I mean, that seems to be one of the significant changes we're going to make related to the project, the up to 600. Would you like us to bring that back on a general meeting, or do you feel like we need another work session to walk through this one more time?
Probably, go ahead. I was going to say probably just a meeting, if you think you can get it, just a regular meeting. I don't think we need a recap of the program and all the pieces. My concern is whether or not we can review all of the red lines and get all the text right. And so.
Yeah, so we can, but I think we can do that as a general business item with the resolution. And yeah, again, I apologize for that not working out, but.
So just one clarification to make sure I'm understanding we're removing the time constraints on the look back. The documentation that is required is a receipt. And here's my question. And the person has to show that they got a permit back in 2010 or 2012 somewhere in their records? Or is it that they just have to show a receipt that they replaced a tree that was, on the tree list or whatever?
I think what we heard, and we're proposing a permit as well to be able to verify that it was done to city standard.
Yeah, I've got receipt, permit, general documents, but I think those two things would cover it.
Okay. If there's any objections to that, forever hold your peace. I'm just making sure we're on the same page.
It depends how much you want to control it in the end. I mean, if somebody did the work 10 years ago and concrete was $40 a yard, I'd love to see a receipt that says 3.5 yards at $40 a yard, but what are you going to do at some point? No?
Well, and if we're asking for receipts, you know, that answers my question about, you know, if we were going to give $600 to somebody 10 years back per panel, they probably, you know, surely didn't pay that. So having the receipt will help us better articulate that. So that works. We can, I think that's pretty straightforward. And if we get you the right red line version, hopefully you'll be okay with that. We can adopt it.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. All right, on our agenda, the last thing we have is our communications section, city manager's report. Do you have anything for us?
I don't have anything tonight.
No.
Thank you.
Could I make a suggestion that if everybody's in agreement that we forego those reports, we have one other thing we need to do tonight, and I think that is far more important, and since it's 9:30, I don't want to be super tired.
I was going to ask,
I figured I was reading your mind there.
I don't have any reports.
I've got no report to make.
I have reports, but I don't need to make them.
yeah, I don't have anything either. So, all right, so we're good for this evening. And after this, we are going to move to executive session as stated at the top of the agenda. Therefore, this meeting's adjourned.